Welcome back, everyone, to Lesser Known Operators. I am your host, Nicholas Allen, and my guest today is Jesus Negron, also known as Zeus, a Sergeant Major from the 1st Special Forces Group. Before that, he was an 11 Bravo in the 101st, and he could even be found trotting around JBLM and some strikers back in the day. He was an 18 Echo Fox Zulu. He is now living his best life, managing a gym and chilling out. I'll have links to his socials in the show description. Today's episode is brought to you by the Green Beret owned business Precision Wellness Group and Dr. Taylor Bosley, said Green Beret. Precision Wellness Group helps you fuel your momentum through bioidentical hormone therapy and evidence-based personalized telemedicine. Dr. Taylor Bosley is a board-certified physician, U.S. Army veteran, and again, a Green Beret. He knows where you've been, where you want to go, and how to get you there. And he's an actual doctor who can prescribe you actual medicine. So if hormone replacement therapy, testosterone replacement therapy, peptides are something you've been thinking about for a while now, or just looking into, look no further than Precision Wellness Group and Dr. Taylor Bosley. I'll have links to their website and socials, along with Jesus or Zeus in the show description. I do appreciate you guys. Please remember to like, subscribe, share, comment, pass these episodes along. Thank you for listening. And enjoy the show. Jesus Negron, welcome to Lesser Known Operators, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Absolutely. I appreciate you reaching out, giving a follow on the content. And I think we may have met in passing in 2nd Battalion, but as I've said before, I was only there for a couple minutes, and then I was off to Korea, and then as soon as I got back, they put me back over in 3rd Battalion, so I didn't spend too much time there. So I don't think we've officially met, but it's nice to meet you finally in person.
Same here, brother.
Man, you're working at a gym? How'd you get into that? Are SF guys really into fitness still after they get out? Or God, no, man.
Well, I am, for sure. This is the only place I can, pick up and throw down heavy shit, So,
it's the only place you can hurt yourself and still grow.
Yeah. Facts. No, man, what's called, so, after I got out, took a little while to find my purpose again, my motivation of like where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do. And, I love fitness. I love training. I love working hard. And so I had the opportunity to, continue this. I do have a degree in kinesiology. So I was like, well, might as well put this to use somehow, some way. So, I came in and said, hey, I want to be a trainer here at this gym, local gym. I live in a very small town in South Carolina. But, decided to say, hey, let me try to be a trainer here. And when I came, of course, just like anything, going into civilian populace, man, they're like, man, you might be overqualified for this, so because they don't see us, many people like us around here. And so they were like, hey, after 4 or 5 months of training, I had a good time, was having a good time with clients and everything else like that, and getting results. And they were like, hey, we got a management position. And I was like, I don't know if I really want to manage. I've been managing people for quite a long time. And the owner was like, look, man, this is the easiest management job you'll have. You're really not doing much. You're just making sure that the gym is still running. So I was like, sure, I'll give it a whirl. And now it's like a second home to me, man. Like I say, I just love to see people changing, and getting at it, so trying to change the culture around here a little bit,
It's quite the switch, though, to go from first group in the greater Seattle area to a small town in South Carolina. It's got to be quite the shock to a system. And now working at a gym with just a few customers and things like that. But I mean, it sounds great to me. I'm sure it sounds great to a lot of people listening as well. Like, man, I'd like to go to a small town and disappear too.
Yeah, it is. It is quite a shift. But so I graduated from this small town. So that's what brought me home. My dad brought me home because, he's not doing too great in health. But like I said,
sorry to hear that.
That's what brought me back here. So, plus, I had to get out of Seattle, man. I love Seattle because, the unit there. But like, I was like, I got to get out of here, man. So I just didn't like some of the perspectives, I guess you could say.
It's the most beautiful place in the country that nobody likes. It really is. Like everybody's got a problem with, well, I mean, I don't say everybody. There's people that like it there or they tell themselves they like it there, but it seemed everybody at group was just like, I do not like living here. It's so beautiful. Outdoors guys were all about it. They would just disappear on the weekends, but man, the general attitude around group is, oh, this place sucks. But I don't know. It's got to be a lot better with the cost of living down there in South Carolina now. That's one thing a couple guys have brought up to me now with out by First Group is that it's so expensive to live out there that
It's
guys aren't
definitely,
able to afford cost of living at all.
yeah,
Is that
dude. I
creeping
think if
up when you were out leaving out there too?
yeah, I think if I was to stay in Seattle, I think I would have to have like, I don't know, like 2 jobs for 100K with 100K income coming in because it's just so expensive out there. Coming here, man, definitely bang for buck, with of course my pension and, everything coming in now, it's well worth the living, man. I own land. I'm happy about that. I'm in the cut, so off the beaten path, if you want to say. Um, and it's just me and my family, and we love it out here. It's a little slower pace, but I
Fuck
like
yeah.
that.
No, that's okay. I would just recently spent a few weeks in a small town in unfortunately it was in Oklahoma, but man, just a sleepy little town hanging out, doing my gig down there, and the town had one of everything, and it was kind of nice. You just there's not a lot going on, you know. The only thing that happened was you know, and I don't go to the bars anymore, but the Legion was packed on Friday nights, everybody there, and that was really it. I drove down Main Street. It's just nothing happening. So, man, it's nice sometimes to get away from things, especially after, I mean, 25 years. Time to chill a little bit. But then you get into a this cushy management job, and now you're just stressed out all the time.
No, what's called, yeah, I mean, like I said, I think when I got out originally, I mean, dude, from 3-letter agencies to, different contracting jobs were reaching out, you know, pretty much on the constant, with plenty of opportunities for me to go continue doing what I just got finished doing. Um, Unfortunately, though, my wife has a vote. My wife has stuck beside my side for 20 years doing the profession that I did. So I was like, okay, what is it that I can give back? Um, and her thing was like, when you get out, and I tell anybody this when they're retiring or they're getting out of services, if you have the opportunity to take a year off to where you don't answer to absolutely nobody except yourself and the people within your household, your circle, you know, because that was probably about the best thing for me because it gave me time to actually sit down and think about what I truly wanted to do. Um, in order, if you want to say, to keep my mind in the game and keep me sharp. So I gave that time back to my family, spending true quality time, which, as you said, after 25 years of just going, in that military life, it it was a very, very big thing for me to come back into my household longer than a couple months. So
Yeah.
getting relationships with my daughters again, and then also too a deeper relationship with my wife because, like I said, I felt like a stranger coming back into my household and being there longer than, like I said, a couple months, and then, getting back into whatever mix, that was on the docket. And so for me, I had the opportunity to, if you want to say, merge my life back into normalcy on the outside, So, with that, like I said, everything, but, at the end of the day, uh, I've had to learn over many years that, although we want to do for everybody else, you got to do for yourself. And so, I had chose this job because I truly wanted to do that. And I wanted to see people change and I wanted to help. And, there's a lot of other different things I could have done, but this was what was calling for me. So that's why I said, hey, let's do this.
Yeah, you said stay sharp. Um, I mean, I don't have the requisite skills for some of these contracts that come up, but it sounds like if people are calling you saying, "Hey, you want to come do this?" That's got to be tempting. Also, just getting out of it and going, oh, I got one more in me. I got one more. I got,
100%.
and even the one in, God, the one in, and I would not accept that one because several people sent it to me, and I was like, I ain't going to fucking do that. I ain't going to Gaza for. And then they're like,
Yeah.
well, it's $2,500 a day, and I was
Yeah.
like, well, maybe I can go to Gaza. I guess I could do a vacation there for a
100%.
couple weeks.
Yes, 100%. It is. It's
Some of
very,
these things are pretty tempting, man.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, especially when you see, like, especially when they go, oh, it's X amount of dollars and this is what you'll bring home. And I'm like, man, just one or two trips of those and we'd be all right. So, but
It is. It is. But yeah, you have to take consideration of the family. And also, uh, when you get out, it's this weird time of, for lack of, what do I do with my hands? What do I do here? I don't know how to act. I don't know how to deal with this society. And it gets easier like the higher up you go because you're not really, I don't know, stuck down, like, not stuck. When you're still on a team, like you're deep into life, and like the more leadership positions you get up into, you kind of get separated from that, and you get into this administrative role and away from the operational side of things. And it's more like civilian life, I guess. You're coming in, you're working at your office job, and that's kind of like how a lot of jobs are on the civilian side. You're just managing, and that's why they're they're reaching out to you, and they're like, "Oh, we can get this guy to jump over to this program and run this thing for us easy." It's no, especially on the government contract side. But how was that transition for you getting out and having to figure out or find your way in this new world that you've been away from for 25 years? I know it's
um,
pretty hard for all the enlisted guys that come on here.
yeah, so I guess first off, if we back it up, so in 2019, we had just gotten back from a deployment, and you know, how it is. Everybody goes and comes back and goes and comes back, and then you get in this routine, right? And this routine is just a monotonous routine. And then we hear about different things of like, hey, if you go speak to this person, they're going to stop your career. Hey, if you do this, that's going to take you off of non-deployment status. And so for the latter half of 18 to almost 19 years, that's what I was doing. I'm good. Like I'm good, even though there were little things that were off with me, and I always used to tell all the operators, like, hey, there's two sides to the fence, right? You got your work and then you got your home. And of course, we always said it, leaders above me always said it. I said it when I was leaders, hey, there are going to be times when things at home start to kind of merge into your work life because that's what's driving you, right? Everybody's got like an internal drive. Some people it's money, some people it's family, some people it's just to have a purpose. And so when I had gotten back from Afghanistan, kind of spawned into like, hey, I need to follow up on some of the stuff that maybe I'm going through, and at first, the command was very, open and understanding. But, as a sergeant major at that time, they're like, whoa, what's going on? Like where's this coming from? And, just like I used to preach to my operators, I'm like, hey, I'm here. I'm going to take care of you. If you need something, just talk to me. And so I did. I started talking to people, and, the command became very supportive of me doing what I needed to do. And then that's when, if you want to say it, things started to unfold where all the stuff, and I call it Pandora's box, right? So all this stuff that I had been doing all through the years kept getting stuffed down, stuffed down, stuffed down. Why? Because, it's like, hey, you ain't got time to worry about that, stuff it away, put it away, next on the docket, let's get it. And so that's how my mentality was, and I think that's what, if you want to say that's what kept my edge up, it's because I was just stuffing it down. But like I said, when, everything had occurred with my spouse, then it was like, okay, now I have to face some other things, right? So I'm taking care of that, right? Which is a nut roll with the military, because, it's just like anything else, right? Military say, hey, I'm going to support you as a service member, but, as far as your wife or your spouse or your, children, things may change because we only pay up to X amount of dollars. So when I did that, I went through, I got some help seeing, and that's when it became very evident to medical professionals of saying, hey, you may want to take a step down. And right there, that was like literally, it was like someone having like two bell hooks gutting me, and I said, that's not going to happen. Like, I'm going to continue to do what I love doing. Cause I honestly truly love being an operator, and so that was the beginning of the transition of me going from the medical, if you want to say medical discharge, to having to come to terms of like, hey, I might not be able to do this. And of course, once the medical goes down, then, the command gets word and command gets notified. And then all of a sudden the ball is rolling. And so, it became the same thing where, you got TAP and everything else, I went through that, which is crazy. Cause like I said, it was like things got expedited, here it is in the service. You're like, like slow rolling everything. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, you got to get out, boom. Right. And it felt fast. So it felt like I was on a freight train. And although, the internal command was very understanding, the preponderant big army was like, got to meet another bill, got to go. And so when I initially made that transition, it was a lot of me trying to figure out, to be honest, was like, man, am I truly this messed up? And what do I do now? Here it is. I've been doing this for 25 years and, I don't know what I'm going to do, because sure, you're in the service and, you're getting a degree possibly, and you think like, hey, when I get out, I'm going to do all these grand things. But then when it comes to the time, you're like, whoa, what am I going to do? So in that transition process, I went to a place, you may have heard of it, but it's called UHP. It's a University Health and Performance. It's down in Bentonville, Arkansas, which is a great establishment that helps people find their purpose or their why. And so I had the distinct opportunity to work with one of our Thor trainers that transitioned over to UHP
Hunter.
as an intern. Did that, and so I did that for a little while. That kind of got me in the right mindset of like, okay, I like fitness. Fitness likes me. So, maybe this might be the avenue that I want to take. But still, yet it's still that lingering thing that's over your head that be like, well, I still have a family, so like, is this really going to pay the bills? And yes, you're getting a pension. Yes, you may be getting some medical, compensation. But at the end of the day, you're like, still, as me as a man, I'm like, is this going to provide for my family? And so that stressor came on. So when I started making that transition, that's where reality kind of set in. It was like, well, what am I going to do? And like I told you at the beginning, it's like my wife had told me like, hey, take a year to yourself and become one with yourself. Because like I said, is, integrating back into my family was a challenge, because like I said, I haven't been around that much. Sure, weekends and stuff like that, but it's not the same when you're under the same roof 24/7, 365, when you're not used to that. I had to learn how to communicate, how to integrate, how to get myself involved in my family. And then, oh, by the way, I have this stressor on my shoulder of like, hey, I need to also provide for these people too, and so when I took that year off, that was when we exited the military. It was a very eye opening of like, like what am I going to truly do now? Like, I don't want to go back into the same stuff that I just got finished getting out of, because evidently I'm not right now, like I may think I'm right, but something's all still off with me. So plus I want to maintain my family. I mean, like I said, to have someone stand beside your side 20 years of doing this stuff, that's a toll in itself. And so when I did that and transitioned over into civilian life, that 1 year, believe it or not, was like a godsend, man. It was like, man, now I know what it means to, like, if I don't want to do something, I don't have to do anything. And if I want to say no, I can truly say no, without getting any retribution back on it, saying like, no, you're going to do it now. That was a rhetorical question, type of thing. So, the transition for me was tough, I'd say, for the first year and a half. From just, like I said, is like, you know, I had things ingrained in me. I was still getting up super early in the morning, still doing PT first thing. And then, like you said, I was like, what do I do with my hands now? So like my neighbors at the beginning they were like, yo, what are you doing? Because I'd be out there, I sit on 4.5 acres. So it's like I was building my own fence around my whole entire property by myself, and then my dad would come and help me every once in a while, but literally that was just for me to keep busy so I wouldn't lose my mind. But also too, I had to kind of take a step back because I was getting that feeling of like, hey, if you want to say self-medicate in one way or the other, of like, hey, you know, 6-pack of beer won't hurt. 6-pack turned into a 12-pack, 12-pack turned into a 24-pack, and then we started bringing hard alcohol into it. And so like at that point, that's when I was like, hey man, like find yourself, center yourself again, right? Because you have more to offer. You just got to figure out what it is that you want to offer to people. And it wasn't gunslinging anymore. Although it's great light, but like I said, that wasn't it. So
It's a tough thing to let go. Anybody that gets out, it's a tough thing to let go from the service. You said, you're in the sergeant major billet, and you said you started looking into that things weren't right going on here, right? Invisible to everybody else. It's not like you got a fucking broken leg. Did you say that command went, whoa, what's going on here? As in like, whoa, why the fuck? Or as in a curious, what's going on here? Or what do you talk like? What do you mean that attitude there,
yes,
that reaction you said the command had?
yeah. So at first it was like, whoa, like if you want to say like, what do you mean, Zeus? This ain't you, type of thing. But they were supportive. I will give you that. But also too, that was also
Okay.
a time where mental health had just really, if you want to say in the military, really took off, as far as like, hey, we need to help our troops. And, at that time, the battalion CSM, he was very, very supportive on making sure that I could do what I needed to do. But also too, as we want to say like, hey, everything from all higher levels were like, everything was peachy creamy, but it wasn't. You're in a sergeant major billet, so you're expected to do sergeant major stuff. And when you have to go, because I went to 2 inpatients, during my, if you want to say, my last year and a half of transition, which, like I said, kind of raised a couple eyebrows, and people may have had their feelings. And
Who's you don't have to say, but like what level of eyebrows are we talking about? Like your upper looking down on you, or your peers, or what?
Both. I'd say both. Some of my peers, some people understood, some people didn't. And then of course, at that higher level, it's like, what are we going to do? Because like I said, at the end of the day, you're taking a billet. And, at that time, that's when it's like, if you want to say should or get off the pot, type of thing, because still things need still to get done. And, I was managing and trying to manage. And then it became a point to where, I had to have that realistic talk of like, hey, I'm just going to step down because, I know y'all are trying to bring people in to, to do the job that I need to do.
And the reason I'm asking those questions is point, and it's a fucking bummer of a point, right, that I'm going to bring up here, is Chad Miller, same as I did.
Yes.
And when that happened, everybody went, oh, I would have never expected this. And I went, really? Like, I did, like, look at the whole story. Look at the whole story and go, you couldn't expect this to happen?
Yeah.
All this trauma and then being in these high pressure positions where everybody's looking at you. Like, this is the shit you guys are supposed to be seeing. And you guys, everybody's saying, oh, I can't believe this happened. Like, just look at it objectively from what everyone tells you and go like this. I mean, I always feel bad. Everybody feels bad when that happens. So like, I didn't do anything or I couldn't do anything. It's like, well, we're separated and nobody talks about it. But then we get this, like when people do talk about it and you're not, and everybody's like, whoa, what do we do? Wait, hey, come on, man. Come on, So I try and bring up to like the fucking duality of this. Yes, it's a fucking job in the United States military, but come on, like we're big focus on traumatic brain injury and mental health and all this shit now, and then but still this carryover from what is it, from like the bro side of your brain of like, fucking just suck it up, man. You're not bleeding, there's no bones sticking out, you're fine. No, I'm not fine. Like, this controls everything here. I'm not fucking fine.
And that's the thing, right? So, you get that perspective, right? Or that perception, right? And to be honest, this, people want to say it, they're going to say it. People want to sit there and lie about it, they're going to lie about it, right? And the biggest thing is, I would say the preponderance of operators, we come back, right? We do reverse, SRP and stuff like that, right? And we get to a survey, and what are we doing? We either just blow through the survey because we're tired of SRP, right? And we just want to get to the next thing, and we don't do that. But here's my question to people, right? And in our community, right? Because we want to put mental health on a high pedestal, especially now in the military, with all of the suicides and the potential suicides and all these things that people are now starting to bring up. But we are required to get a physical once a year in the military, right? Or when you go to a school, you're required to get a physical. Why don't we ever make it a requirement to go talk to somebody? When literally our jobs as operators is one, and we hear it all the time. I know you probably heard it. I know I heard it through my entire, operator career, is we want to keep you mentally and physically sharp. And like you said, is this, right, plays heavier than anything else physically, right? If your mentals aren't right, the rest will follow. I mean, it's a fact, sure, your body will, toughen through things, but once your mind goes, the rest follows. The will to live, right? If you stop willing to live, your mind and your body will quit. So I always looked at it like that, especially when I got out. I really, really started looking at like, how, if you want to say, I started playing back the tape, like, where did I go wrong? Where did you go wrong? And I realized that perception at that time in my career of like, hey, just get through it, of that quote unquote, if you say something, you're going to be judged, or if you say something, you may not be operational anymore, or they'll take you off deployment status, or whatever the case may be. I when I look back on it, that's where I think I went wrong. I should have been honest with myself and honest on those surveys, if you want to say, because maybe it might have changed a little bit because I would have been talking to people a lot earlier rather than trying to deal with it when it all just, when the dam broke, it broke, you know? But, you know, like I said, is, you know, that's, unfortunately, you know, I would have loved to go to 30 years. I had the aspirations to be in, you know, first group sergeant major's position right now. And I was on that path, you know, I'd taken over a company. I'd already did, you know, the S3 sergeant major. Was looking to be next battalion CSM, you know, but like I said, at that juncture, when all that started to come into fruition, then, you know, the gates, the floodgates just let loose. And at that time, that's when it was like, hey, you know, if you want to say, you got to hit the bricks, you know? But do I take any of my career back? No, I loved every bit of it. It's like I told you before, I felt that I was different, you know, coming in the military right after high school, like immediately after high school, like the day after graduation, I was in MEPS and going to infantry, you know, basic training. And, you know, 1997, me going into basic training, I knew nothing. I knew nothing about Rangers. I knew nothing about airborne, none of this stuff. All I wanted to do was I went to a recruiter's office, saw one of those cool guy videos, and was like, yeah, I just want to do that stuff. You know, but they never told me about any Ranger contracts or any of that. So I just did the infantry. And I thought that was like the best thing ever, you know. After I got finished with, you know, basic training at AIT, I got stationed in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where I started my career. Had a great time there. Got an opportunity to go to Bosnia, which that was like my first ever thing. That was my first time out of country. And I was like mind blown, you know, as a E4 sitting, I don't care, watching the gate, just sitting there, you know, but I was in a different country. I was doing stuff that I was like, man, so this is what it feels like to be, you know, part of something bigger than yourself, you know, type of thing. And then I had the opportunity to go over to the LURS detachment in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I did that. And then that's when everybody was like, oh, Ranger this. And, you know, I was like, what is this Ranger thing y'all talk of, you know? And they were like, yeah, you got a school or you got battalion, you know? And so I was like, oh, what's the difference? And, you know, people were kind of explaining. And, you know, when you go over LURS D, you got to go to airborne school, you know? So, because that's your way to infill. So I was like, okay, well, I'll go to airborne school. When I got there, going through there, you know, I was talking to guys that had like, you know, Ranger battalion, you know, package that they were going from, you know, airborne school straight to battalion. I was like, how do I do that? And then of course everybody's like, oh, you know, you got to go through RIP, you know, and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just ask when I get back to my, you know, to my unit. Well, when I got back on there first, they were like, no, you know, they were like, you're not going to battalion.
Yeah, they're like, no, you ain't going fucking anywhere.
Yeah, you're here, right? We just spent money for you to go to this school, you know, so you belong to us. And then in 2000, man, I got this packet that nobody ever really told me. I thought, you know, once you get to a duty station, that's it, man. You stay there. You know, so honestly, that's literally how oblivious I was to the United States military at all. So I was like, once you get there, that's it, man. You're here. This is where you plant your roots and you just work and you just get at it. And, you know, new people come, old people will go, you know, type of thing. And 2000, I got this packet and they said, you're getting PCS. And I'm like, where? And they're like, you're going to Fort Lewis. And I was like, well, what's there? And they were like, well, you're going to turn mechanized people into light fighters. Now, mind to say, here I am, you know, I'm an E5, believe it or not, just full of piss and vinegar because all I know is light infantry. You know, that's all I know. And I show up before Lewis and they're like, hey, you're going to help us transition this mechanized unit into the strikers. And so I was just like, what in the world? And then I saw the other side of the military. Like, I thought everybody was like light fighters, like, just full of piss and vinegar, in shape, getting at it. And it wasn't, you know?
Nope.
Yeah. And so,
Nope.
we did that. And what's it called? When, when I got there, I got promoted to E6. We had transitioned from Humvees to Strikers. And then in 2003, we got the call to go to Iraq, and we went there. And that's when I got the other coin of like, what the hell am I doing? Because it was like, hey, you're going to go out, you're going to walk this road, and, you're going to look for IEDs. And I was like, what? It's like, we have a unit for that. Why are we doing that? And they were like, no, you're the infantry, so that's what you're going to do. And then, like I said, mid rotation, I had the opportunity of, if you want to say, route security for a group that was in country with us in Mosul, and we were doing a route security. And for them, when I hit and they came in, and I was like, who in the fuck are these guys? I was like, dude, they just came in, just did what they had to do, and we just watched them roll out, like, boom. And I was like, dude, what is this? And so what was supposed to be a 7-month, 8-month rotation ended up being a year for me of doing that and watching towers and just sitting there. And I was just like, what in the world is going on? So when I got back, I walked over, there on Lewis, right across from that. I walked over there and I said, hey, I want to find out like what SF's all about. And I had the opportunity for a guy to say, hey man, this is what we're about. You can come out, you can, do a little PT test or whatnot. And I was like, dude, I could do that tomorrow. Let's do it. I just give me to where I need to be. And so they did. And like literally 4 months after we had gotten back, they were like, here's your orders. You're going to Fort Bragg, North Carolina for selection. And so I went to selection. And dude, I was at that time, I had just gotten picked up for 7. And when I got there, it was like, and I hear you talking about some of some of your other episodes of the SOPSI kids, right? So I didn't know anything about this, and before, in order to go even try out in, like I said, that was about 2004, going into 2005, you had to be a specialist. It was, you couldn't just go. You had to be a specialist or an E5 to go, or, E4 promotable to go. And so here I am, E7, at selection, and I see this platoon of SOPSI kids come in, and it's me, and then there's another operator that's still in the unit now. But here it is, him and I, he's an E6, I'm an E7. And we're looking in this platoon of SOPSI kids, plus, a couple other different MOSs that are coming in, but we're like, if you want to say, I call it like we were like the old men of the group because here it is, you got these thoroughbred people that have been like created into machines by getting smoked and, degraded for, I don't know, months going to SOPSI. And so like, if you want to say, that's when I was like, man, talking with some of them guys, they were like, yeah, this is what we do every day. This is nothing, type of thing. And so, of course, I'm thrashing, I'm giving what I got, keeping up with these, if you want to say, younger kids that don't really know the military because they're coming straight in the SOPSI program. And if you want to say, that was kind of like, for me, it was kind of good because it was like, man, these kids, this is all they do is train for this, and here it is, I'm doing like the big Army 9 to 5, and I'm able to keep up with these kids because at that point, like I said, it was, where I was is, you had a couple of people that were really in shape. And then of course, you had your stragglers that you were trying to get in shape and make sure they're, doing the right thing, as far as being, if you want to say, a light fighter in a mechanized world. So to see this platoon of South Sea kids come in, I was just like, it was a breath of fresh air to me. So I was like, hell yeah, all these kids are getting at it. I love it. This is where I want to be. Got selected, and then, of course, went back to Fort Lewis, and that's when I got the other taste of, like I said, and my command was like, hey, you made selection. So, I got told by multiple people, this is career suicide, because I was an E7. They told me, this is career suicide. You'll never amount to anything in special forces. And so I was like, thanks, guy.
Cool, bro.
Thanks for the motivation. Thanks for the inspiration of saying, hey, you want to do bigger and better things, for the military. I would have rather heard that rather than like, you're not going to make it. It is career suicide, And then, like I said, at the end of the day, I went through selection or the queue, and I was supposed to be a Delta. And at that time, I never get it. We're all in formation right in front of the big building. And so the instructor comes out and he was like, from here over, make a formation. From here over, make a formation. So we split up, and he was like, you all are now Deltas, you all are now Echoes. And we were like, okay. And so I started the course, and then because I was in E7, they said that I had to have an MOS change by this date, or I was going to go back to the big army because it was needs of the military at that point. So I jumped. I was like 2.5 weeks behind in the Echo course. And so I literally pretty much stayed out with the Echo committee for like a week, catching up. And then I tested to catch up where the class was, so that way I can meet the date. And then from there, man, it was getting it, I knew that's where I wanted to be. My heart was there. I knew that was going to be my new purpose. And I wanted to be around those type of people that were like-minded,
Well, that's a quick 10 years of your career there we paved through here in a couple of minutes. But why did you want to leave home as an 18-year-old kid so bad?
Well, it was a lot because my parents weren't the loving, like, kumbaya, like, hey, good job, type of thing. And, even in my household, there was times where, they were like, oh, you're not going to amount to anything type of thing, but I was a good kid. I had good grades. I played sports, I had a future, but it was just that behind the scenes kind of like, if you want to say, degrading, to where it's like, well, I'm gonna prove you wrong, right? And here where I'm at in this small town in South Carolina, I mean, at that point, literally there was like one stoplight, just like what you were saying, like one store, grocery store, one little pizzeria, and like an auto body place and a gas station. That's it. So there really wasn't much for me to really truly stay around here for. So I was just like, let me get out of here. And
Why the military, though?
well, while I was in high school, I went through JROTC.
Okay.
And so I like the structure of it. And we did things, like, in the summers and stuff, went, competed in different things, school against schools and stuff like that. So I really enjoyed that. But also too, I do believe, because of talking with my dad, my dad, was in the service. So hearing some of his stories of like going to Germany and going here and going there, I was like, I can travel. Little did I know.
So you heard stories of him being able to travel places and go all these other different bases, and you thought when you got to Fort Campbell that was it. You're just there.
Yeah, because they didn't. That's just how their mentality was there at Campbell. Was like, this is it. You're a first 502nd, your first strike. That's it. This is where your home is. That's how it was perceived. So I was like, I'm not going to travel. This is it. Fort Campbell, Kentucky is it. So.
first, man.
Yeah,
You gotta be all in. That's how
that's
all.
it.
I like how you said that, right? That you get that impression when you get to your unit of that's how the rest of the military is. Everybody's like this. This is just how the military is. Nope, that is not even remotely true. You could just walk across to the building over there across the street, and that's a completely different command climate over there. Uh, they got a bad first sergeant. Oh, everybody's having a bad day. Oh, they got a good platoon sergeant. Everybody's happy. Um, and even where I'm at now, it's just from starting to do this show. I went, man, I really held my perspective from Fort Sill, Oklahoma, over the rest of the army for all these years, and just went, that's how the regular army is. That's how it is. That my experience in fucking buttfuck Oklahoma uh, is how the military is. That's it. And now I've started interviewing people and talking to people and going, yeah, that's not it. Like, there's people that were happy in what they were doing in the regular army, at least a little bit happy. And that was, there's units that were like, they're running around and doing shit and they practicing. And it's not just sweeping the motor pool and complaining about having to do a suicide stand down every few months. And, what else was some of the stupid stuff? PT failures and DUIs, and well, DUIs are universal. Everybody was getting DUIs all the time. We were getting in trouble for them getting in trouble. But yeah, it's crazy what you think when you're a young person in the military, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah, I mean, even today, man, like, you know, closest installation that I'm close to is like Fort Jackson. And so just going on there, it's like, I'm like, man, these kids, they don't have any idea like what's about to go down. Like, and they're in it, you know, they're in it. And it's like, why aren't people talking to them, truly explaining what's about to really happen, you know? Um,
They're gonna figure it out. They're gonna figure it out. Um, but even just like in SF, um, I talked to people from the mid 2000s or 2010s, and I'll put stuff up, and then but the guys still in now, they're telling me a completely different life of what's going on in group than what was going on when I was in, and that was only 7 years ago.
yeah.
There's so much changed. So unless you're plugged in right down at the team level or company level, you don't really know what's going on, and it's it's interesting. Like, you could tell somebody the truth now, but that might not be what it is when they get there. Just know that it's going to be fucked up when you do get there, and you're going to have to adapt to whatever situation comes up. That's I guess that's kind of the only way to put it. Like, this is your outline of what's going to happen, but any of this shit inside this outline that can happen at any given time. So it's tough to prepare for and get people ready for, um, and especially like with group, right? And I said this to somebody the other night. Somebody called me and we were talking about how life was for them where they're at. And I said, what? Yeah, well, some of the issues you're describing here is there's no one left from September 10th, 2001. There's nobody left at the team level or the company level. There's no one who remembers September 10th. There's people that remember September 11th and afterwards left in the company or battalion area, and they learned from those people, but no one remembers how things were. And I think we lost continuity. We definitely did lose continuity of how things used to be and what we used to do. And now, are we going to have to make it up again? Probably.
Well, and you said it, because I'll give you the example, when I got to group, it was 2007. Okay. When I got to group, I, I was one of those new guys that were like, boom, you're in Echo, you're deploying. Literally, the sergeant major looked at me. He said, are you married? This is a group sergeant major, right? Because the company was already gone. He was like, before I send you down to the battalion, are you married? And I was like, yes, I am. And he's like, your family affairs are good. And I was like, yes, they are. He says, pack your shit. You're leaving in 2 weeks. And I'm like, excuse me? Like, so that was like the first thing for me. But now when I got in the country, right, which was in Iraq again, when I got in the country, it was like the receiving sergeant major was like, we thought you were a Delta. And I'm like, nope, I'm an Echo. And they were like, oh, we need Echoes too. So they just used me, a team would, need an extra Echo somewhere. Boom, you're going there. You're going there. And I did that. But when I got back, it was kind of, if you want to say, like you said, that continuity of people sitting there saying, hey, sure, there's a GWAT, but also too, this is what we do. Like, this is the other spectrum. Like, this isn't going on. This is what we're doing in different countries throughout our AOR, And so that's where, for me, I had the opportunity to understand, right? But also too, at the same time, I'm trying to prove myself because I'm a new guy, right? And not only am I a new guy, I'm an E7. So now people are really, really judging me, right? And that became into, believe it or not, because being in the regular army during, if you want to say, no money time, right? I knew how to bang bang, I knew how to do all those things that were at this point kind of like alleviated for, the SF community, because they were in full GWAT. And so, believe it or not, when there were times throughout my career where we started kind of like going back and forth, like, hey, this is downtime. We don't have money because we're spending it on GWAT stuff. I was able to adapt and have, people on my team and understand and stuff like that, to where, believe this or not, they were like, oh, I had a nickname for a long time, was like regular Army Zeus, because that's what I had learned for, almost, 8 years of my life. This is how you make shit happen with minimal shit, because big army, you ain't getting shit. You're getting to be there from, O dark 30 to O dark 30, sitting on your hands until some squad leader, some platoon sergeant says, oh, by the way, we forgot, you got to go clean the motor pool. And be like, dude, it's like 5:00 in the afternoon. Why didn't you tell me that at 9? So, like you said, that continuity is now becoming, if you want to say, I believe, I don't know, I'm not there, but off of just the remark that you just said, off of talking with people, yeah, that continuity is going to hurt now, because now it's like what I said, is now we have to explain what truly our mission is and how we do it with minimal support, if you want to say, or money.
Yeah. And it's not as simple as what I just said there. And that's not a blanket statement. That just could be one team and seeing one thing, or one unit, or one group, or whatever, and other things like that. And also, the makeup of the teams. You could have an old team. There still do exist old teams, which would be like a few guys in their 30s now would be an old team. But now you got teams where guys are, the team sergeant's 32, and then everybody else is younger than him. So that's a pretty atypical thing coming up these days. So I'm not saying to everybody's going to have a different situation, but it's going to be interesting going forward with how things come out with that. But that's I don't have to worry about that. But I do have to. I think I bring light to it, as we said before we started recording. Right, there's other sides to this stuff. The old GWAT became such a big shiny object in the sky because it was combat, and it just didn't go away. Everybody thought it was going to go away for probably 5 years. Oh, this is going to be over soon. This is going to be over soon. And then they went, yeah, now it's old dependable here. And then it switched over to, is this ever going to fucking end? And then those people got out of the military, and then the new generation came in and went, oh, this is always going to be here. And then they just shut it off one day. They turned the lights off, left the country, and said, yeah, we're done with that. Even though we're going to still be doing it, we're done with it officially, and things like that. But no, it's a changing landscape, and It's interesting. Group is getting smaller, the mission, but we'll get into that here in a little bit. But back to the 101st. You had 4 years, 5 years, 4 years before 9/11, and you're running around, and the greatest thing in the world is the 101st Airborne Division that you've ever heard of, and how much of things change. So you are just still doing tip pocket training as an NCO now, running around yelling bang bang, and then things change because you were in the 101st through September 11th, right? Or had you already PCS?
No, I had PCS to Fort Lewis.
Okay, so you went to second strike or second
Yeah, so I
striker,
went
second ID,
to
whatever it is.
yeah, 1st 23rd Infantry Division, which when September 11th hit, I remember because we were in the chow hall. So me and my squad went in to eat, and all my teammates were already sat down, and I was walking, I had my tray in hand, and of course, you got a couple TVs, and I saw this clipping of a plane actually hitting the tower, and I was like, what is this? Because it was like, the ticker was on, so I knew it was news. I was like, where is this at? And all the rest of everybody else was kind of like, just eating breakfast just like normal. And then all of a sudden we see the second one go in. I'm like, oh man. And then shortly after that, maybe about, I think it was like maybe 30 minutes, we were about to start gearing up to start heading back to the company area. There was a couple of runners that came into the chow hall saying you need to report to your platoon sergeants immediately. And then all of Fort Lewis got locked down. And then of course, they were being in 101st. I understand what DRF status was, right? Being constantly ready to get out. But we had started, if you want to say, the DRF status. So we were packing our bags and stuff like that, just in the case, because like I said, at that point, here it is, you had this vehicle that at that time, General Shinseki had put into the military. And in my mind, I was like, well, if there's any other time to try to test this vehicle that you spent all this money by bringing people in, this is probably going to be the time. And big as shit, they started getting right there, on JBLM. They started prepping the vehicles on the C5s and stuff like that. And then next you know, it was the hurry up and wait game. So we sat, locked down on post in our company areas, just waiting to see if we're going to get a call. And of course, we didn't get a call because at that time, who they're calling. And they're calling like 82nd, Ranger Battalion, all these people that not this 1st 23rd Infantry at the time, they weren't calling us yet, so we got told to stand down. But then that got into a more, if you want to say, all the leaders now became, instead of like that hip pocket training, to where now it's like more defined training of like, we are, battle drill 1 alpha, and we are going to do it to perfection, and then also, we started implementing the vehicles a lot more, and the training, if you want to say, kind of got anteed up a little bit more. Right now we're doing more live fires, and in Big Army, that's like, to me, it's like an act of Congress, because you got to go through, bang, 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 blank, 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 one live fire, go, type of thing. That's just how it is. But it became, hey, we're going to do blanks and then live fire, and so to me, I knew, it was like, okay, hey, this might be real. We might actually get the opportunity to go do this, and so that became the, if you want to say, became the appetite throughout all the leadership at every level of like, hey, now we need to kind of like, if you want to say, dial it up a little bit, because we're going to get the call. We just don't know when,
Yeah, what'd you think about that? Because things are pretty quiet until then, and now like, this could be a real thing that we have to go do. Nobody knew what it was going to turn into as the deployments, but as a young leader in the military, what's your thinking like? Or just as a person, like, what have I got myself into now?
Well, the first thing is because, well, you know, as a light fighter, like I said, it was always like, you know, we're ready to go do the deed, right? I mean, that's how I was raised in the 101st. Was like we train that way, you know, like deployed, go, you know, hit. We really did train like that. Then when I got to First 23rd Infantry, you know, it was like kind of, if you want to say, for me, I thought it was like a step back because, like I said, we were transitioning mechanized people into light infantry, so they didn't understand tactics. They knew how to do a tank for sure. You know, they knew, you know, their battle drills, you know, for, you know, tanks and stuff, but not as far as light fighting, like get on your feet, you know. So you know, we had a lot of light fighters that had gotten PCS there to transition the unit. We were focusing on that, but did I think we were a T at that time? No, not even close, you know. And then now for me as a human being, I'm like, wow, I was like, what is going on? Like somebody literally just came and spit down our throat in our back door. That's how I felt. And so in my mind, you know, talking with buddies at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, they're like, yo, we are geared up, ready to roll. And so here I am. I'm like, here we're still training, you know, to possibly get the call. So for me, I was just like we should be way beyond this point, you know, especially when we know we're going to get the call, you know, because it's the inevitable, right? It's like a shiny object in the room. So strikers were the shiny object in the room because we just took away all these tanks, you know. So like, what's the next mobilization, you know, piece of equipment that we can insert into a wartime environment? And so that was the shiny object in the room. And I knew, you know, after spending millions of dollars on the shiny object, nobody was going to be like, we're just going to let you chill out. I knew that wasn't going to happen. So
I've got to imagine. So, you know, Fort Lewis, I stayed on North Post for a little bit when I was uh, just back in the States and then I was going back. So I stayed on North Post. Man, I would walk around North Fort every night. One, to steal guidons, and two, I would just kind of look around. Man, I had a game out of it. I would get a guidon every night. I couldn't believe it. Like sometimes I would get them back to back. They'd forget them again, but I'd walk around there and man, were those strikers as big pieces of shit when you got them as they were in 2016, 2017 when I was seeing them?
most definitely, man. When
It's
we
just
go
they're brand new, right?
brand new, like, and you know, when you get a new piece of equipment in the military, you know, what do they say? Test it, tried and true, right? You want to make sure you test every limit that you can on anything, any piece of equipment. So of course, you know, it started out with like, dude, I watched a wheel literally come off and just roll away. So I'm just like, really? Like, what is that? I watched the hydraulic ramp get stuck to where they had to use the troop hatch or the troop door rather than the ramp coming down. Um, we took it to NTC and we tried to drive it right off while, you know, C5 was taxiing, you know. Yep, shocks, done. It rolled off, it dropped, and that's where it stopped. You know, so you know, I saw all the, if you want to say, iterations of the striker all the way up until I think it was like 2000. Yeah, it was like mid 2002. Um, and that's when they, if you want to say, quote unquote, said, hey, we perfected it, right? And so here it is. Here's this new striker vehicle with a 25 Bushmaster on it, you know, and you know, you're good to hook. And then they deployed us. And then in the country, we really started seeing everything because, you know, it had been tested in that type of environment, truly. And especially when people were like, you're going to drive from one end of Iraq to the other end of Iraq and all around Iraq because we want you to have a presence, this vehicle to have a presence in every fight that's in there. Um, but yeah.
I would always feel bad for those guys at Lewis because, you know, like you'd be on a corner at Fort Lewis and there's their motor pool and there's 3 strikers on the side of the road. They didn't
Yep.
even make it. Like, man, we didn't make it this far. That means this can't just be the soldiers' fault, right? For not taking care of the 10 level tasks in the TM. Like, I feel like these things are pieces of shit. And the government just dumped money. And then that's funny. So you guys deploy with them and they're like, no, we're gonna show these things off as a shiny new object for the military. And that probably didn't go well either.
Yep. Yeah, because well, when we went in there, I call it we went in slick, right? So I don't know if you ever saw the strikers. I don't even know. They may have still had them, but they had like this. I called it the chicken shield, right? It's like this railing system that goes all the way around the striker. Well, that railing system was, believe this or not, the first couple of months we were in Iraq, we got hit with RPGs. Go figure, right? So we started getting hit by RPGs, and they were like, man, some of these areas that they're hitting in is getting into what they call the soft spots of the vehicle, and so they were like, we got to do something about it. So somebody in their infamous geniusness while in country said, oh, we can put these shields that have pretty much slats that are about this wide. So that way, when the RPG comes, it catches. Right. So we did that. Well, what they didn't think about was like, well, if it catches, then that's still a live ordinance. So what do we do with it? And here you are, whole bunch of 11 Bravos.
Hit it with a hammer.
Exactly. Like, we got to get it off the shield because we don't want to keep traveling with this thing. So it was just crazy, man. But I mean, like I said, is at that time, if you want to say like, yes, we had a lot of problems with that, with that vehicle, but also too, I believe it met, I don't know all the back, all the higher echelons, but it met what they were trying to do as far as like getting large number of capacity of troops to a certain area in a very quick time. So I think those things hit like 85 on the highway, like if they're just humming. And so, driving through Iraq, you're convoying with 4 to 8, strikers, and y'all are just, just hauling, so we could get places fast. That's the reason why they decided to say, hey, go all over Iraq, to help support or help, be, a supporting element of some type of operation,
Sure, it can go fast, but I remember one guy told me it got like 8 gallons to the mile or some shit like that. I'm sure he was joking, but I mean, he probably wasn't that far off.
Yeah.
And I didn't say miles to the gallon. I said gallons to the mile. So I can't imagine that thing's really conserving fuel while traveling at 60, 70 miles an hour across rough terrain. So, sure. Yeah, it meets commander's intent as long as. So, okay, well, that cleared that up. But I just remember this. It's funny, you see this stuff and go, yeah, man, those things look like they fucking suck. And sounds like they did, but we can move people around the battlefield really easily. So that's good.
Yeah.
When they work. So you said you ran into a special forces unit while you were deployed. What was that experience like? Did they roll up on an ATV, say 21 days to a better life, and then get the fuck out of there?
No, what's called so like I said, we were doing their route security, pretty much just making sure everything was good. They came in, man, and they were on Humvees at that time where, they were open Humvees. They had these little rails on the side where like dudes were hanging off the rails, and literally they go in, they hit this objective, and then boom, they're out. And I was like, yo, who are these dudes? Like that to me, I was like, that was badass, because we wouldn't do anything like that.
Had you not seen any fifth group guys at Campbell up to this point when you were
I had
there?
seen them, but it was not a lot of like interaction because they kept to themselves and whatnot. So I think I talked to one fifth group dude when I was in Lurs at 101st. And the only reason why is because they were jumping in with us to do their own little thing. So pretty much they were dovetailing off of our aircraft, But when I was in Iraq, we went back to the fob, and I didn't know that they were on the north end of the fob. And so when I was there, I kind of like went up there because at that time, you had to call home. You had to sit in line for a payphone, or one of those little MWR phones. You only got 10 minutes to talk or whatever, right? So that was on the north side of the fob over there in Fob, Mosul. And so I went there. They had a gated community, just, gated off and stuff like that. And so I had asked one of the guys that were coming out here, it was a support guy. I said, hey, man, I was like, can I talk to somebody in there? I want to know like what it's like to do what they do, And the support guy was like, oh, well, I don't think they're going to talk to you, man, because you're just a regular Army dude, And so
typical support guy thing to say. Where I'd have been like, yeah, fuck yeah. Like, what does he want to know, man? You want a beer? Like, come on in, man.
yeah, so the support guy's like, well, I don't think they're going to talk to you because you're a regular Army guy. So I'm just like, huh, all right, But then we saw them. They were getting ready, and we were, of course, going up there, getting our vehicles ready. And I jumped out and I talked to one of the operators, and I was like, "Hey, man, like, what is it that y'all actually do?" And they were like, "Oh, well, we do a lot of, DA hits right now, and stuff like that." And then he was just like, "But if you're interested, man," he said, "Where are you from?" And I told him, and he was just like, "Oh, there's got to be a recruiter up there. You need to go talk to them, And so in my mindset, I was like, "Hell yeah, I'm gonna find where this recruiter is," because I was like, dude, and they were, kit was different. It wasn't like, our kit where like everything's uniform on your kit, like everybody's got the same magazine, same place, same pin, same place, same first aid pouch, same plate. It wasn't like that. It was literally something I was like, man, like that makes sense to me. Like not everybody is the same. They don't pull the same. They don't do all the same stuff. So I was like, man, that makes sense. So I was like, man, I gotta figure this out. I gotta go. So we did like 2 more missions with them. I didn't get to see them the second or third time because I was in a different position. But the first time I saw them, they had rolled on in, like I said, soft skin Humvees with these rails on the side. They jumped off, did this hit, had a couple of pucks, and then boom, they were out. And so I just thought, I was like, man, that's legit. And so, like I said, the entire deployment, I was talking with my spouse and stuff like that, and was like, hey, I think I want to try something different when I get back. We'll talk about it more when I get home. And I got home, and first thing I did, when we were on our downtime, I was like, where's this recruiter at? And I found the recruiter, and it was like, hey, this is where they're located at. They give, briefings on these days. And I went over there, and the guy was like, hey, this is what we do. He says, you might want to, go research and stuff like that, other operations. He talked about Vietnam, of course, because, everybody in special force community, of course, lay their hat on Vietnam, right? And all the things that happened there. So a lot of people were pushing me at that time of like, hey, go read books about, Green Berets during the Vietnam era and stuff like that. So when I did that, I was like, oh, okay. So I understood their mission of where it was true, UW. And I kind of understood like, okay, I see how this plays, because I still have my big Army cap on, trying to figure out the soft cap, And so that's when I went in and was like, hey, man, I want to try out for this. How do I do it? And he was like, this is what you do. I explained it to my wife. I was like, this is what I want to do. She was just like, if that's what you want to do and your heart's in it, she was like, then what do we have to do as a couple at that time, because we didn't have kids at the moment. And I was just like, well, I just got to meet selection first, and then we could talk about the next thing. And so that's kind of how, my wife and I kind of tackled it, was like one thing at a time, and like I said, when I went out to selection, it was a breath of fresh air, because I was like, man, everybody's in shape here. Everybody's throttling, like everybody has a passion to do this. It wasn't like the big Army where like, you got some people that are all in and some people that aren't. They're just like, I'm gonna just do what I'd have to do to get by. And and it was big boy rules. I thought was, like I said, to me, it was a breath of fresh air because it was like, instructor come out, read the whiteboard, so it was like, fair enough, I don't need to hold your hand. You're a grown man, pack your ruck, you know what the weight is. They gave us the things to make sure we're on weight and, be ready for whenever you get the call. But like I said, it was just, to me, it was refreshing just to see, like I said, I watched this platoon get off the bus of SOPSI kids, and they all came into the barracks that I had that time that I was staying in for selection. And they all knew each other, and, they were sizing me up, too, because they were like, who is this guy? He's not part of the SOPSI gang, sort of thing. And so we started getting into events, and then they were like, oh shit. Like, and then once they found out, like, oh man, you're E7 in the Army, like big Army, and they're like, yeah. And they were like, that's crazy, man, because all they know is them, but it was just, like I said, it was a good time during selection. Like, a lot of people say they dreaded things, and honestly, I was literally, going there, one, to see what I was made of, and to get through. And that was my mindset. It was like, hey, you're going to have to beat me up a lot for me to quit, because that's not happening. Right. And then also, I'm here and I know what I want. I've seen the other side of the fence. So I know what this could potentially be for me. So it just gave me that much more drive, right? Of understanding, like, hey, I want to go into an organization that, if you want to say, it's a little bit more free thinking than what the big Army is, of like, do as I say, not as I do type of thing. you know?
How's your regular Army unit feel about this? When you tell them, because you said you were a 6 when you went to selection, or a 7?
I had just made the 7 list when I entered selection. So I had gotten pinned right when I got back from selection. And so believe it or not, like I said at the beginning, when I first said, hey, I want to go do selection, of course they were like, well, you're about to be an E7. That's career suicide. And I was like, but I could still do it. I just need you to sign this piece of paper. Yeah. And so, like, reluctantly, they were like, whatever, type of thing. When I went to selection, if you want to say the way I was received, regardless if I was going to make it or not, they put me into the battalion S shop. They had already slotted me over. And so I was like, okay. So when I showed back up from selection with me saying, hey, now I'm selected, they had slid me over to the S shop, and I was literally doing paperwork. So I went back over to where the recruiters were, because the recruiter, when you make selection, they tell you to come back, and, they help you out, make sure your orders and everything are good to go, and, help you with whatever else you need. At that time, that's what they did. I'm not sure if they do the same thing or not now. But so I went back over to the recruiter, and he asked me the same exact question. He was like, how's your unit taking it that you made selection? And I told him, and he goes, well, it may be a stab in the dark, he said, but what we can do is I can take you over to the group sergeant major and see if he'll allow you to what they call OJT. Being that you're an E7, so it's kind of like, being, because of your pay grade right now, it's not like he's got a private or a specialist or somebody coming in that he has to babysit, And so he took me over. In the group CSM at that time, he was like, normally I don't do this. But I told him, I was like, look, I just feel like, because I went to better myself, that these people are throwing me to the wolves now. And I don't understand why, when this is a military organization, right? We are still under the big Army, no matter how you want to shape it. And so he's like, okay, well, I'll let you OJT. He says, but you'll do some details around here that need to get done, and then also too, I'll put you down on a team just so you can see what that was. And so I was like, okay. And so I had the opportunity to, of course, clean up the group area, which was great, because I didn't care, because I was like, I'm not in an office pushing paperwork right now, but all I'm being told is to rake all these leaves right in front of group. So I'm like, fair enough. And then I got the opportunity to go into 3rd Battalion. And at that time, I think it was 175, not even 175. I can't remember, but it was the dive team. And I'll say his name because he was a great mentor to me. It was Master Sergeant Young. He now is like a free fall person out there at Lewis, and he literally was the first true interaction with a Green Beret that I had. He brought me in. He said, "Listen, I know you understand infantry tactics, and you understand big army." He says, "But you have a lot of road that you got to cover before you go through the Q course. And if you get through the Q course, being in your pay grade, you're going to be expected to be on, come on the ground running." So I was like, okay, well, I don't know what that means. So he was like, what you're going to do is, and that time they were doing pre-scuba training. So I got introduced to that, which was, I love swimming, but I'm going to be real with you, man. Like,
That's not swimming. That's not swimming.
I was like,
For everybody, anybody listening at home that's like, oh, swimming, yeah, I'm good at swimming. No, you can be, no, fuck, that ain't swimming. That's just fucking torture.
Yeah. And then I got to integrate with the team. But he specifically was like, hey, you need to, he gave me like SF manuals essentially. And he says, you need to start reading about what we do on this side. And so that's what I did. I took that to heart because, like I said, he was allowing me the opportunity to even be on his team, as, if you want to say, an observer. And then because they were like, hey, do you know what MOSs you chose and stuff like that? And I said, yeah, I chose, because they told me I was going to be a Delta, at the beginning. I said, this is what I'm going to be. And then they were like, okay, well, what we'll do is we'll just have you tag along with that MOS. And, and at that time, it was a total of 8 people on the team that he had on the team at that time. And so I got to be able to see and do everything with them. And then, of course, every day, he was trying to break me off when it came to PT because he was just like, I can't let you get soft before you go to the Q course. That was his mentality, he was also one of those guys that was like, don't speak to me until you're spoken to, type of thing. Even if I had a question, I'd have to wait until, you spoke to me. And then I'd be like, hey, by the way, since I got your attention right now, I have a question about X, Y, and Z. But I had the opportunity to OJT. And then I came down on my orders. And then we came out before Bragg, so.
It's got to be cool experience to just hang out and see the other side of things, even if you're just just doing whatever bullshit tasks and shit like that. That's got to be pretty cool.
Well, it was, yeah, and it was, and so, being in that was, I call that like my true start to SF. I never forgot that. There's a lot of people that are like, oh, I'm gonna do it my way, and the only way is known. But I always, no matter what, even throughout my career, I always thought about all the shit leaders that I had and how it's not going to be like that, and how, honestly, how I wasn't going to let any rank ever change who I was. And so that was the biggest thing that throughout my entire career, that I stood beside. I was like, I don't care. I'm still a dude. I tie my boots the same way you do. It's just in this organization that we both work for, right? There's a structure that has to be from top to bottom. And it just so happened to be, I'm climbing up the structure, but yeah, then went to the Q course and made through the Q course. And like I said, came back and got assigned to 2nd Battalion. And
when When did you get your language? Did you get your language after selection?
No, I got my language. It was like middle of the Q course is when they actually gave the language. Because originally, this was
What
crazy.
language
Originally,
did you get?
so I got Indonesian, but originally I
Okay.
went to, and so here's the other thing too, right? So the CSM that allowed me the OJT, he must have continued to track me because maybe, I don't know, maybe he saw something in me. He was just like, yeah, this guy's gonna make it, type of thing.
Or he was
Because
bored and he's
yeah,
like, where'd that guy go? Yeah.
yeah, 100%. But originally I was supposed to go to third group because I went into the language thing, right? And I tested in Spanish and got literally like a 1+2+ in Spanish right off the bat. So when I did that, they were like, oh, you're going to go to third group, because in the intermediate, when I first got there, they were like, oh, you can test out for all these languages, and stuff like that. So I went and tested for Spanish. And when I tested for Spanish, I got one, like, it was like I said, I think it was like a 1+2+, and they were like, all right, you're going to go to third group because
Aren't
that's
you
where you,
fluent in are you
yeah,
fluent in Spanish?
yeah.
And
But
you only got a
my
one
my
plus?
Spanish is like, it is like Spanglish, so
Okay.
you know, cut corners and stuff like that. So proper Spanish, no, that's not me.
Yeah. Why third group? Why not seventh?
I don't know, just at that time, that's where they said I was most likely going to go.
All right. Well, that doesn't make any sense, but whatever. The group's a weird place during the GWAT anyway. So okay, so they were wanting to go third, and then you end up in first group speaking Indonesian,
Correct.
which also strange because you reached out to me. I was like, Negron, Jesus, first group? Why is he in first group? There was a guy in our hallway who, I mean, English definitely was second language. I was like, why are you here, man? He's like, I just didn't want to be to go to seventh. Like, I wanted to learn something else. I wanted to do something else. He's like, I've been in South America my whole life. I want to do something else. I was like, that's a great reason,
Yeah.
that's a great reason to go do something. I was like, he's like, it just seemed too easy. I was like, okay, that makes sense. That's a great answer. So good on you. But I applaud it. So, but yeah, traditionally not the first group, not the place for full fluent Spanish speakers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did it ever come in handy, the Spanish and anything?
Well,
Because did you
well,
learn any Tagalog or anything?
I did. So when we went, of course, to the Philippines, I was like, man, I saw a lot of these words they're using, they're like Spanish words. And so when, believe it or not, I started talking with the Filipino, Marines down there, I would speak Spanish and they'd kind of like look at me on some things, but then they'd understand like half of what I said. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is a very close. So then I started taking up Tagalog, especially because we were starting to go there a lot. So I was like, all right, cool. Let me start learning a little bit of Tagalog. So I learned it on my own. I didn't go to any language course or anything else like that because I was just like, well, I'm just trying to just do enough to get by, you know, and to be able to converse with the people and the locals and stuff like that. But yeah, had the opportunity to, like I said, just learn and kind of adapt to that environment, with some of the skills that I already had through speaking Spanish.
What did you think of the Q course? Because at the time you went, oh god, so what is that? 2007, 2008.
No, it would have been 2000. So I got back from Iraq in 2004. So it'd have been like 2005.
2005. Okay. So was that when was SEER at the end, right
Yes.
after graduation at that time? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Um, I wish I was smarter. I could get this whole thing laid out. It's moved around so many different ways. And now somebody messaged me the other day about some different thing now in the course. And I'm like, God damn, man, they change this thing all the time. They can't
Yeah.
optimize. Every time they switch it, it's the best it's ever been. And then they
Yeah.
immediately, when the commander switches out, they change it again. So, and then it's the new best it's ever been. It's the same way it was 5 years ago, and we had to get rid of that. But what'd you think of the course? Like coming from being a pretty experienced regular Army guy that now going into this world, how's your perspective changing, and what do you think of it?
The first thing was just the autonomy that you had as a student. I mean, it's like just like anything else, like, right place, right time. That's all you got to do. And just, now it's up to you, right, to either succeed or to fail. So, when we went into SUT, unfortunately for me, because I have my Ranger tab, they were like, hey, you got your Ranger tab. Guess what you're going to do? You're going to help those that don't understand infantry tactics or SUT tactics, and you're going to train them. And
In SUT?
your success will be off of how other people do. So it was like I was teaching op orders, I was teaching, all about drills, etc. Patrol bases, the whole nine. And so to me, I was just like, at one point I was like, wait a minute, like I'm doing his job.
That's what I was going to say. I said, this sounds a lot like the cadre wanted to cycle off.
Yeah, exactly. So literally that's what it was. And some parts I understood it because, at that time, like I said, it was a lot of people that were coming in the military or coming into SF that did not have that underneath their belt. So they were focusing on the areas of like, hey, we need to train these people because this is the preponderance. So of what's coming into, our community. Right. So we need to make sure that, so it was me and another guy. And then there was there was three of us. It was me, another enlisted guy, and a captain that pretty much had a Ranger tab. So we were doing all the things when it came into our small unit, and so when we did that, we sat there and made sure that like, hey, everything was good. And then, as it came, the first thing one of the instructors said to me was like, hey, you are going to do an op order. So it was like the easier things, for me to do an op order. And then I was like, okay. And then they put me out like, hey, you're going to be in charge of this, objective. And that was it. But it was literally, I think, if you want to say my go was off of other people's understanding of what they were going to be asked to do, which I was okay with, so I'm like, cause I like to teach, I like to train. And, I like to say that I can, talk to people and give them a better understanding of what they're doing and why they're doing it. Cause like I said, I wasn't raised by the greatest leaders. Sometimes they were very shitty leaders. So I had to adapt a lot.
I've heard that from a few guys that they had Ranger tabs going through SUT, and the cadre were like, you've got to prove, like you had to prove that you were worthy of having the Ranger tab. Like, wait, that doesn't make any fucking sense, man. I already did that. Like, okay, but now you got to do it to these students. But that's your job. Isn't that why you're here to do that?
Yeah.
Because I assume you and he's been to group, he's been there, for a few years. And now he's a SWIC cadre, but you guys had been in the military the same amount of time, and you've had soldiers. He's never had soldiers. Like, so I start drawing all these comparisons, and I go, this is a platoon sergeant. I mean, he's been in charge of like 40, 50 people sometimes, and this guy, he's had one soldier ever, most likely.
So like I said, for me from the outside, I was like, oh, I see what's going on. Like, I'm doing his job, but like I said, it was one of those things where like, I knew I wanted to be there. So I wasn't going to be like, no, I wasn't going to be like, the hell with this.
You're a student. That's the other thing. You're a student. You're like, oh yeah, absolutely. I got to get this done here. Yeah. You want me to have them wash the side of the building too? Yeah, I'll get that done as well. So, yeah. Well, I get it. And that might not be the case, but when you see it from the outside perspective, you go, Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that. Let me start stacking these two up against each other. But okay, he's got the tab. I don't have the tab. I better just do what he says and then get out of here. It's not that bad. The course isn't that hard. It sucks, but it's not that hard. So how but we did skip over that. When did you sneak Ranger school into your regular Army career?
So I was at Fort Lewis. I had just gotten there in 2000. So during like late 2000. So they had sent a couple of squad leaders to Ranger School. And when I say they, my company. And all those squad leaders came back and they either failed or they quit. And it was off of like either PT test or they fell a patrol or, they quit on the 5 mile run, whatever the case was. And we were out in mass formation. This platoon sergeant that he was 11 Bravo. He had just came from, I think it was, where was he? Oh, Fort Drum. He had just came from Fort Drum. They sent him to Ranger School, right? He came back and he failed. He wasn't even there. Like, I think it was the PT test. He failed and came back. So our first sergeant, he was irate, right? And because he had sent, X amount of squad leaders to Ranger School, and he was out in mass formation. He was chewing everybody's ass because their failure is everybody else's mistake, I guess,
This
and
is
so
obviously my yeah, there's a E2 in the back going, this is obviously my fault, right? This
yeah.
is me. It's my
Yeah,
fault here.
exactly. So we're out in like I said, mass formation, and he was just like, is there anybody in this formation that can go to Ranger School right now and pass? And just like big army, I was like, huh, you know, and he was like, who is that front and center? So I broke ranks and I ran up front. And then he kind of talked to me. He was just like, you think you can go to Ranger School? And you think you can pass? I was like, Roger that. And he goes, what makes you so certain? I said, because I'm a light fighter through and through. And he goes, all right. He was like, I want you to go over to the S3 shop. They're going to get you orders and you're going to go. And so I go to Ranger School. And I go to Ranger School and, make it through all the phases. First time go. End up getting distinguished honor grad and came back. And I, it was just one of those things where I was like, I'm not going to fail. Well, first of all, I'm not going to fail a PT test. I don't care how many. You can keep saying 0 and I'm still going to pump them out the same way that I did on the first one, and, running, I'm a good runner. So I was like, I'm not going to fail that. I said, you're literally going to have to drop me because of another reason. It's not going to be because I can't make it or I lose a patrol. And to me, Ranger School was more of a leadership school more than actual, if you want to say tactics. Yeah, you do tactics, you do op orders and stuff like that. But to me, it was more of a leadership school. And I think that's where, kind of like how I told you, before, is like, that's where I'm wired a little differently, right? So as a leader, I really try to get down, like you said, the higher you go up, the less people try to get down to the lowest level. I always made sure that I got down to the lowest level. And if someone didn't understand something, I took the time to make sure that they understood it and why they were doing it. And that was the biggest thing that I had learned from Big Army is people were telling me what to do, but they never told me why I'm doing it. And so when I went to Ranger School, it was getting a group of people to do what you needed them to do, right? Under, of course, the extremes of, sleep deprivation and maybe no food, and to me, it was very easy bringing those people together because everybody wants to pass, right? So that's how I would talk to them, like, hey, man, y'all want to pass? Do it this way. They give you a Ranger handbook for a reason. Don't deviate. It's not that hard. Like literally. And so even that's how I took everything in the military. Military is not meant for you to fail, ever. It's up to you to fail. But they're gates, if you want to say, that put your glide path to success. But it's up to you to mentally get over that, physically get over that, whatever the case may be, depending on what you're doing. And so for me to go to Ranger School and I guess if you want to say display like truly how Fort Campbell raised me, of being if you want to say a tactician, but then also having the ability to have that insight of what bad leaders are and to kind of hone that in for myself and say, hey, this is how I want to be a better leader than some of the leaders that I had. And so how do I do that? And I started realizing that people just, of course, just want to be talked to as people. And 90% of people just don't understand why they're doing something. So they don't give you their all, because they're like, why am I doing this? I don't understand it. So that's what I started implementing, if you want to say, in my leadership style, and so, like I said, I went to Ranger School and banged it out and, came back. And then, like I said, then it was like, I was a E6 with a Ranger tag and, EIB and, shit like that. And, and just continue to, troop the line, if you want to say, stay in my lane and, just, like I said, big Army Zeus. Regular Army Zeus just stayed exactly where he was because, I'd had one leader, like, I'll never forget him. His name was Staff Sergeant Drummett. And I was bad rucker when I was in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Bad rucker. Like, I'd run 6 miles, 12 miles, and he'd be like, just walk. And I'm like, I don't see you're like 6'6", making strides. I'm not 6'6", So I was like, I'm just trying to keep up. And he'd be like, you just need to walk. And he had told me, he was just like, what I just said to you is nothing in the military is meant for you to fail. You just got to understand the techniques of how the military wants you to operate. And so he taught me how to ruck properly. He taught me how to pack my ruck. He taught me how to step it out. He taught me how everything. And he didn't do it during, if you want to say, duty hours. He, at that time, was like, every Saturday at this time, I'm coming to get you and we're rucking. And I'm like, me being, specialist or private, at that time was like, what? Every Saturday? That's my off day. And he was like, no, it's not. Because he kind of showed that caring side of the house. It showed me like, here's the reason why you need to do this. And so that kind of, like I said, helped me be a better leader. And then when he left, I got the other spectrum of, do as I say, not as I do type of person,
This is partly from interviewing people, and this is partly from getting older, and now partly looking at things from a cynical side. All right, yeah. Excellent leadership, right? He's coming in on Saturday on his day off to mentor a soldier, which technically can be done during duty hours, but good, we're getting extra time in. But now, as an adult who's ruined his life several times, I'm up to, I think I've ruined my life 7 times now. And I go, man, what's going on at that guy's house? Where he's like, yeah, I'm going to go hang out with one of my Joes on Saturday and get away from what's going on? What's he trying to get away from? What's he trying to keep himself busy with to avoid doing? Like, is he got, he's got something going on. He's like, he's too, So I look at that other side of things. It's like, yeah, it's a commitment. But some of these issues that we have, and not to go off too far, on things, but like, look at this situation and then go, man, there's something else going on here. There's something else that's going on. Like we get into this life and it requires a great commitment. But what are we pushing aside? Yeah. So I don't know. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, he's doing a great job mentoring his soldiers. But what's going on at this guy's house and where he's leaving? Maybe he's single. Maybe he's got nothing to do. Maybe he's just doesn't want to go home, deal with family problems. A great piece of advice I got from a sergeant major was, as you start going up in rank, you'll start to stay here later, right? And he told me, he said, when you get to where I'm at, walk around the parking lot and you'll know whose cars are here late and who's staying later than they should. And you'll be like, maybe I need to have a talk with this person. They've been here late 20 days in a row. Like,
Yeah.
why is this guy staying late? Maybe I just need to just go ask him if everything's okay and things like that. So, we said before we started recording the other side of things. I see that now at the age I'm in and the position I'm in and talking to people. Whereas now when you're in it and you're a young guy, you don't see that. But I don't know. It's a weird thing because I'm getting older and I think of those things. I go, I hope he was okay. That's what sometimes I think of that stuff. I was like, I hope that guy was okay. Doing that.
Yeah,
I
100%.
don't know what
Because
you think about that.
and you know 100% because like I said is now hindsight, right? After being out, I started realizing like, sort of the same thing like you're saying is like I was busying myself rather than focusing my attention to other things because I felt like I was either going to fall short on something, or I wasn't. For me, it was like I wanted to make sure that I was doing things, either for my team or for my company, to where if you want to say it would take some of the pressure off of them, to get out and do what they needed to do. But like you said, it's one of those things where like you will at some point, and team sergeants, you know, good seniors sometimes fall into it where they're like staying later than what they need to stay, or doing more than what they should be doing because they feel a certain way, or they're investing, and that also too is those small indicators of like what's truly going on. And believe it or not, that's how, when I was a company sergeant major, that's how I would walk down the halls at certain times of the day and be like, yo, why are y'all still here? Like there's no reason for you to be here, right? There's nothing, that y'all have on your plate that's that important for you not to allow these guys to go home while we're home to go do what they need to do, because I know I hated it when it was like, oh, you can do that during your off time. Well, you don't let me off until 5 o'clock. So what the hell am I going to do at 5 o'clock? Everything closes at like 6.
It's different when you're a private in the Army. It's different when you're a private in the Army.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the team room's addictive, man. The team room's addictive. That beer fridge, the new guys always got it stocked. The beer light's on. You got your buddies. You don't have to be there. You kind of want to be there. But you had it Friday, had a tough week. But the sacrifice, right? The first thing we talked about is like the family sacrifice. Then you're like, I got to give back to my wife. You're sacrificing their time and you're not even asking them. We did that. We all did that. We asked them to sacrifice their time and their life. And we didn't even ask them. We just like, yeah, this is just how it is. And some, not all, some of the time consuming activities that we would get ourselves in are completely made up. We created those. Like that didn't have to happen. Like we're finding more ways to stay away from home or to stay busy and create a higher op tempo than it actually is. Like it's bad enough as it is. A couple guys have come on here and said I couldn't have white space or I would fucking lose it. And whether that white space was just tightening up the fucking white space. So they would take time to make the calendar to just clean it up.
Right.
And that's like the ultimate in busy work, right? And so some of these problems, and again, the other side of things, are completely made up by us as well. And that's not helped by drinking. Every time I ruined my life was because I was drinking. Like, and that too. And that paired with traumatic brain injury, that's
Yep.
not helping anybody at all,
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah, for sure. And that's another thing too, you know, when I transitioned on the military is that's when I really realized that I busy myself. Like it doesn't have to get done, but I'm so used to busying myself to where, you know, it took me, and I mean, my wife brought it up as well. It was like, you know, why are you doing that today? And I would be like, because it needs to get done. But she was like, really? Does it need to get done today? Or, you know, can you take a moment and maybe spend time with your daughter and just put that to the wayside? So, you know, that was a very realization of exactly what you're saying of like, man, now that I think about it, like I used to busy myself a lot, you know, for whatever reason. You know, it wasn't like that I didn't love my family, but I would busy myself to where it'd be like I could go home at 4, but I end up going home at 6, you know, because it's like you said, it's like I had to do something or I felt that something was more important than taking that 1 hour off early, you know, to go home and invest in that and then come back to whatever it is the next day, right? Because it's just like anything, right? When you're on a team, through group, through, you know, SWIG, everything else, right? It's priorities. Everybody's like priorities. It's like, well, that's crazy because you can only tackle one priority at a time, right? You can say you can multitask, you know, but truly your focus has to be in one area, especially in the line of business that we do. You have to take everything one thing at a time and literally dial it in. That's where we kind of make our money. That's where we want detailed planning so important, right? Um, so like I totally agree with you, man. It is, and it's an eye opener when you, like you said, you step away and you really start to reflect, and you're like, now I see the light. Man, if I would have just known that when I was in, you know, or you know, when I was going through it. But like you said, you're so consumed, you know, and you're trying to be in the moment. You're not as present as you think you are.
Yeah, and it sometimes takes two people to break out of the team room, right? You feel kind of weird just leaving the one guy who's like, "I'm gonna go now." Is everybody cool with that? Because
Yeah.
I remember a situation at Sear, and it wasn't even it wasn't Sear, it was SUT. We had 18 man teams, so we were stacked, and my buddy and I, uh, we've both come from the regular army and a lot of other x-rays. And man, we both were the same mind. If we're done, I'm going to fucking sleep. And like everybody would stay awake and like work. And like somebody said something one night because we were paired up, him and I were paired up, and we'd get our work done. And somebody said something. And so I walked to every other pair of people that were still staying up late and doing fucking nothing. I was like, go to sleep, guys. Get some sleep. We're not going to get any better here at 10 o'clock at night. Go to sleep. And so we walked to every pair of people and said, do you need help? No, 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 no. And then I stood out there and I went, just so everyone's clear, we asked you guys if you need any help. You said no, we're going to go to bed. And so him and I just got extra sleep for all of SUT because we'd get our shit done. And they would just stay up and fucking worry about shit. I'm like, why? Go to sleep. Like, go to sleep. And then, you know, you got to have that. You got to have somebody else because he was good with it. I was good with it. We're in the same bunk. Let's go to bed. But if you're one guy out, it's tough to leave. It's tough to pull yourself away from that situation when the whole group is doing, uh, you know, fun activities or just hanging out or bullshitting or shitting on each other, you know? So that's some of that aspect of the team room plays into it as well. And it's not exclusive to SF. Like, uh, infantry squad, it's the same way. They that's all they do. They go cause an alcohol related incident together. You know, they get kicked out of the strip club together or whatever. They all go to the same places together, and they grow up. They live in the same barracks, all in the same row there, and or wherever you're at. All units get to be that same way, and well, it kind of fits though with the military. You're working together, you're playing together, doesn't help for transition or having that home life and times
100%.
and things like that when you need to pull away. So you just get addicted and too far into it and things like that. But went off on a tangent there.
No, I mean, that's the truth though. I mean, like you said, like that small blurb that you just said, somebody that might watch this or listen to this might be like, I never really thought about it like that. Like maybe I need to check myself a little bit too, you know?
What you said earlier, earlier in the beginning before we start recording, all my content is just what I'm thinking, especially the stuff I write. I just will talk and I'll just write it out and then I'll say it. And I think a lot of people are thinking that same way. They just won't won't write it down or put it out there or talk to other people about it. Whereas I know all of you are thinking the same thing I am. And it's got to relate to somebody. It's got to help somebody. This show has to help somebody. You and I having this conversation, or my guests coming on, and the somebody could just be me and you having a good conversation. And I brought up as like a base, unbelievable, like for the show, right? I had 7 Green Berets in my phone in January when I started this. I got like 100 and something now contacts of
Yeah.
Green Berets just in my phone. And over Instagram, I have access to tens of thousands of special operations guys. I can get a hold of anybody I want to within the day. And that was pretty quick. I did that in 8 months, right? But if the only 2 people that get anything out of it is you and me, when's the last time you sat down and had a 2 or 3 hour conversation with a new friend ever? You know, I get
Mm-hmm.
to do it all the time and I get to make new friends and learn what they're doing. So now people message me, hey, do you know somebody that does XYZ? Yeah, I do. Let me send you their contact information. Or I see somebody's content, or you see somebody's content and you're like, that person sounds like this person. They should talk. They should do a collaboration or something like that. And I can link them up and take there. So yeah, I'm becoming aware that everything is helpful to somebody as long as you just say it in the right way. Say the right thing the right way. Actually, it doesn't even have to be the right thing. Just say the thing the right way and be willing to change your opinion if you're like, yeah, that's kind of fucked up. I see this way is a little bit better or that way is a little bit better. And then stand firm on some things, which I try. I try. It's the way to go. Where'd you go first in group? Did you go back to your OJT team? No, I doubt it.
No. No. So when I got back to group, I got assigned to group. Like I said, I went to second battalion. They were forwardly deployed. Went there, helped them out. Pretty much got thrown around with the mix. So I got to see a couple of the teams, but not really integrate a lot with them. So I was just pretty much hired help at that time. Um, when we got back, I got told that I was going to Charlie Company, second battalion, and I walked in there and talked to Sergeant Major, and he was just like, you were forwardly deployed with us. And I was like, yeah, but I was, an AST slash, you know, echo when needed. And so he was like, okay. And then so he was just like, all right, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna talk to the team sergeants and see who wants an echo. That's what he said. He says, but meanwhile, go ahead and just start mopping the floors. So I was like, all right, cool. So we were up in the B team area mopping the floors, and team sergeant comes up and he's like, are you Zeus? And I was like, yes. And he was just like, come with me. I was like, all right. So I grabbed my little backpack and went down with him, and he was just like, you're on this team now. And I didn't even know what team it was until I walked in and started seeing the equipment, and it was a mountain team. And at that time it was 163. Great group of guys. But a lot of those guys were starting to, if you want to say, disperse, either getting out or they were going to Swick, or had to move to another team because their order progression, if you want to say. So I got there. I met my senior, which was weird because my senior was an E6. So a lot of people were like, how's that working? You're an E7, he's an E6. And this is where, for me, what I used to tell privates, when I was a squad leader, was be a sponge. until you start understanding what really just be a sponge. And so that's how I took it. And, at that time, even my senior was like, hey man, I know this is kind of awkward, but this is how you got to do it. And I told him, I was like, no, man, you are senior. Forget the rank. You know more about this than I do. And so I'm going to learn from you. And he did. He taught me well. And, you know, he really liked me. But like I said, at that point too, I was still, if you want to say, in that conventional mindset. Even though I knew, I will say, some soft operation understanding, I was still in that conventional mindset. And so that's where a lot of guys on that team at that point were like, oh, that's when they started giving me the name of Regular Army Zeus, because I was conformed, man. You know what I'm saying? After being in the regular army so long, I just thought that was the way of the world. And so that's kind of like what I baselined everything off of, and like you said, after being in the regular army for almost 10 years, you know, I was like, shit, because it was like 8 years. I think it's like technically when I actually stepped over to the soft side. So, looking at that, you know, that's when I was like, okay, well, whatever, y'all can call me Regular Army Zeus. So I kept my mouth shut for a long time, right? I spoke when I was spoken to, or when someone would want an opinion about something. And then, just like I believe, at some point of every new guy, right, you then if you want to say, you build collateral, right? And you kind of build collateral with your team, and then you have the opportunity to showcase in one way or the other, whatever that may be. Could be your actual MOS because you're giving a class, or whatever the case may be. And, being that they had just gotten back from deployment and stuff like that, going through a couple months with them, it became training cycle. And within that training cycle, Lord and behold, we had to go to NTC. And when we went to NTC, who did we have to speak to? Big boy conventional army. Why? Because that NTC rotation was integrated, right? So it's bringing in soft operations into conventional support, and etc. Well, that's when, if you want to say, I had my showcase time, because I understood the big boy army. I understood how they think. I understood how they talked. I know who to go talk to, who not to talk to, in order to get what we wanted. So, of course, the team sergeant's over there doing his thing. The captain was doing his thing. And they come back and, of course, they'd be upset. Man, these assholes won't listen, this and that and the other. And so I said, I'd like to go over and try to help out, being that I'm from the conventional side. And so I did, and I got the opportunity for understanding of how to merge us together, and et cetera, because I knew that lingo. I knew what they were going to be. I knew all the buzzwords that they wanted to hear, right? Because, for us, NTC is just a training opportunity. For them, it's a grade, so it's like,
Yeah.
it's a grade.
It's a Super Bowl. It's a
Yeah,
really shitty Super
exactly.
Bowl for them.
So that's how I kind of, like, if you want to say, really got acceptance. And then we had a new team sergeant, and that new team sergeant, came from the SIF. So it was a different team sergeant that I was used to, and he, if you want to say, he opened my eyes to the true SF way of, I don't care how you get it done, figure it out. And so I was like, this is different, because the other team sergeant was very methodical and was like, hey, this is what I need you to do, et cetera, et cetera. But he was like, here's what I need done, figure it out. I don't care how you get it done, just get it done. So that's when I was like, okay, all right. And so at that time too, my senior was prepping to get out of the military. We had did a rotation in the Philippines, and that's when I was like, okay, this is the other side of the fence when it comes to not doing, if you want to say, a GWAT mission, to doing, a FID mission and teaching and mentoring other host nations to do X, Y, and Z, right? So when he showed me that, I was like, okay, now this is all making sense, because when I OJT'd, this is what that team sergeant said. This is what we do most. So learn this, right? So that's when I started like really understanding and learning from him, right? From the outside in, right? Just going, as I go, I do, KLEs with them. I drive for them, etc. To do all these different places. And I would just listen. Once again, going into that same mentality of just be a sponge, and as it kept coming, I was like, okay, cool. So, was able to do that. And then I became the senior because my senior had left after that rotation. And so that's when I was like, okay. So it's funny because at that time we were gearing up again to go across the pond, and what's called the CSM for group right now. Him and we've sat across the hall from one another. And so he was an echo just like I was an echo. So we would collaborate with one another, like how we were going to do things, because we were about to go into our training cycle, to start prepping. And so that was when I first got the interaction of someone else that had also been in the regular army, right? That had converged over, of understanding like, oh, okay. So this is what a senior truly looks like in another perspective, right? Another different detachment, right? And so that's where I really started integrating, if you want to say, within the community as a whole. Being a seven coming in though, as it's going, everybody was like, when are you getting promoted? When are you getting promoted? And I wasn't really worried about promotion, but I also, not going to lie, in the back of my head, I was always thinking about what that senior NCO had told me in the conventional at 1st 23rd Infantry, of telling me that this is career suicide. So literally for like 4 or 5 years, I was an E7. And on that team, Team Sergeant had left. I had the opportunity to go to the Fox course, went to the Fox course, did that. And then I also took over the team as an E7 because he had left. They needed a senior up at the B team level. So he had to go up there, getting prepared for another rotation. And they put me in charge as an E7. Then I started running. And I started running because I believe I kind of, it kind of clicked. Both Big Army and the soft operations clicked for me. And then I was like, okay, now I'm in charge to make understanding for everybody else that comes onto this team of what we do both in GY and what we do if we're not a GY. And so this is where a lot of people kind of took it. I don't know. I would say some took it as a good thing, some took it as a bad thing. But I became very, very intense. And it was intense to the point of my perspective as a Green Beret is you're the jack all trades, master of none, right? That's my perspective, right? Because you're like a Swiss Army knife, right? You're going to get called to do stuff that you're going to be like, I don't know how to do that. I've never even done that, but you're going to be expected to do it. But also, two, my perspective was in the Army, you are considered to be at the top. So why are you considered to be at the top? It's because you should be able to run circles around everybody in the big boy army about their own job. And then explain and deliver the soft side of the house on why it's important for those two entities to, one, to merge during certain times, and then also two, right, to why they have their own little certain entities within the structure of the military. And so my thing with new guys that had been in for a minute is, yeah, they knew plenty of stuff about soft operations, but they just didn't understand the big boy army. And to me, that was like winning the battles. When you understand how the big machine works, you're the gear that can turn it up a notch. And so, like you said, it was little things that people were like, why are y'all out there practicing, battle drill, 1 Alpha, 24/7. We'd be out doing company, training, and we'd be the last one off a range or the last one off of, a lane and stuff like that. And it was just because I wanted to make sure that not only me, but everybody knew everybody's position and everybody knew how to operate with leadership, without leadership, how to talk like a leader on a team is and how not to talk, to where it became very quick and evident to hire individuals within the company battalion and the group when we started having like missions, come down, and I'd have like, the junior echo talking to team sergeants, what the team sergeant would do, and just doing that cross training was really important to me because in my mindset, I wanted to, being that I was the guy in charge at that time, I wanted to make sure that team could do everything with leadership and without leadership. And just like, a lot of companies, they have like that go-to team, and that was my number one priority. It was like, hey, at that time it was, 1223 or 1233. And I was like, when you see us on the docket, right, we can do whatever you need us to do. Right. And if when we briefed, they knew like what they were coming into. Like we thought of every angle, we thought of every contingency type of ordeal to make sure that like, hey, not only does Zeus know this, not only does his captain know this, but the lowest dude on this team briefed that to us, and so that's where I really, if you want to say, I really took a lot of I'm going to say I took a lot of pride into making sure that the operators knew what they were truly there for, and if the shit like now really happened, like how that's going to look. Because I introduced it to them, and then also too is understanding like, and I'll say this, like I was that team sergeant that was like, I was never going to tell you to do something that I couldn't do. So like if I was talking to a Charlie and I was telling him, hey, this is how I want my charge to be, et cetera, it wasn't like, like, oh yeah, you're just telling me to do that because of whatever. I'd build a charge just the way I want it and say, hey, look, this is how I need it to be. So to me, I think that gained a lot of respect with the guys because it's like, hey, he's not just one of those guys who's like, do as I'm telling you, not as I do. But like he's actually leading the way and showing us like, hey, this is where we need to be. This is how, how organized, if you want to say, or how collectively we need to be as a team. And it became that way. And so like we became that team where, new guys that would come in, they'd hear what team they go to, and they're, people would be like, yo, I hope you're ready, strap it on, man, because he's going to demand a lot of you. But I think people thrive off of that, especially in our community, is if you don't have to degrade them. You don't have to be that person that's always pointing a finger, telling them like, this is the way it's going to be, this is the only way it's going to be. No, you just show them the standard and you uphold them to that standard. And I think a lot of guys that were on my team, I would like to say, like I said, this is me being biased because it's me, but, I would like to say that a lot of people, that I was able to, serve with on that detachment, can actually walk away and say, hey, that dude taught me a lot. That dude held me to a high standard. And, he really cared about us because I did. I still talked to some of the guys that were on past teams and team before I left. I talked to their families because it was true family with me. Like, and like you said, like it was that point where, when I was a team sergeant, that I'd be like, yo, everybody, we're getting out, let's go. And we'd be like, hey, let's all link up, and do a team party, like just on the whim. That's how we were. And so we had a tight knit family. And it was also the same thing, like when we deploy, I tell wives and stuff, and like, look, I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat for you to get something that's been pre-scripted out about your husband, maybe getting shot or something like that, like I'm going to call you and tell you like, yo, this is what happened, because to me, we ask a lot of the operators. That's the least that we can do is be honest with the people that are standing beside them to tell them like, hey, this is what truly went down, rather than not, if you want to say the carte blanche statement of the day. Of course, being, with operational security and everything else. But like I said, at the end of the day, they would get a call from me, and it was a tight knit group. I had the opportunity, which is like at one point, a lot of people that were in Charlie Company said battalion was like, dude, I don't know how you're doing it. Cause I was in that company for like 10 years. I didn't go to SWIC, you know, I didn't go, to Okie, didn't do any of that. It just so happened to be, I don't know, it's like luck of the draw, if you want to say. But I stayed in that position. I was promoted in that position, and I was even able to take over the company, so as a sergeant major. So
Yeah, Billy DeLucia said the exact same sentence that you just said. I was
what's
able
that?
to stay on the team for 10 years. He got stabilization in the Fox course. He got stabilization with something else. And you said you guys were kind of on a parallel, right? Somehow you guys were on the same track. And, every time somebody says that to me, they're like, you can't duplicate my career path. And then I go, I'll bet you I can find somebody.
Yeah.
And there we go. It's
Hmm.
all these routes are very uncommon that everybody take to get where they're at, but it's also not that uncommon in some of these things. But yeah, so yeah, there's so many different ways to get to where we're going, like in
Yeah.
these paths of success or what we think is success or where we think we want to be. And we can influence it. You can influence some of these things, but then some you don't have any control over, but you can still influence that.
Yep.
And I talked to a guy I talked to a guy the other day, and I said, people think, and falsely, that the military is going to take care of them and push them where they want to go, and that's not the case. And usually, you can influence where you land by just going into Sergeant Major's office and saying, "Hey, I know levy's coming up or whatever. I'd like to go. I know I'm going to SWIC. Hey, can you get me into SUT? Oh yeah, yeah, probably, because nobody else goes in there and fucking does that shit.
You're right.
Like all you could just take a post-it note and like influence some of these decisions. So that was what popped in my head there at the end of, I got 10 years on this team and stuff. If you're communicating what you want, you're not going to get that, but you might get really close if you take the initiative to just network with the people that are in charge of you, because you could go in there and say, hey, I don't want to do this, and then he could have I was the battalion taskings NCO, and I would go over to Sergeant Major's office on the three companies all the time and go, hey, I need this guy to go to fucking Mongolia tomorrow. Who do you got and shit? And they'd be
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, you don't want to go to SWIC? Here, you're going to Mongolia, and shit, something like that. Or hey, we need one guy to go to Just Mag Thai, or oh, we need a guy to go to Oki and shit like that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And,
there's so just
it's funny you say that because like, even, Delucia, he taught me when he did his HRC stint, he kind of like mentored me and said, look, man, like this is the way you need to start looking at it. Because, everybody has perspective off of what they learn, you know? And so, you learn manning, but you don't really learn like the in-depthness and how you can, if you want to say, move the chess pieces the way you want to move them through your manning. Um, Two, like you said, is keeping, your chess pieces tight to where you're like projecting. And so that was one thing that like I always take my hat off to Delucia about, teaching me, because once he taught me that and like how the HRC side of house looks at things, I was like, yo, bet. Like I know Now I know how to set up guys that truly are looking at whatever glide path that they're looking at from, hey, you know, I want to be an instructor, but I want to be an instructor here, or hey, I don't want to be an instructor, but I also want to move up. And that's the other thing too, man. Like I really, at first I was buying into a lot of like the promotion stuff. I really was. I was like, oh, you got to have this, you got to have that, you got to have this, right? But no shit, right? Master Sergeant, they told me, oh, you got to have a degree and you got to have jump master. Bro, I didn't have neither. Matter of fact, I went to jump master, and you know where I went to jump master? I went to Fort Benning, Georgia for jump master school because they
Banning,
told
yeah,
me that I
banning's
had
the
to have
worst.
so they said that I had to go to Fort Benning because there was no jump master courses. Well, while I was in jump master course, I came down on E8. And I was like, huh, all right. That didn't make sense because they said that I had to have that. So, what is it? And then same thing with the degree. They were like, oh, you're not going to get a sergeant major without a degree. Well, I was in the process of finishing up my degree when I went to the Sergeant Major's Academy, and I'm not saying that that's right for everybody, but I do say that if you're doing your job and you have someone that is writing your evaluations properly and showing your worth, right? Not just for that 1 year, but your worth for future years. I think it comes to the middle, right? That's just my opinion, right? Because like I said, a lot of those key gates of having things I didn't have, and sure, it's a networking thing, 100%. Do I think that maybe somebody said something to somebody else? Possibly. I don't know, you know? But I will tell you, at that time, the CSM that was in charge of the battalion, he understood the Manning. He understood how to position the people that he wanted to be in higher positions because of who they were and what they were about. I think he did a phenomenal job because, like I said, you know, myself, Delucia, and there was another sergeant major. We were all kind of like, if you want to say, his three that he wanted to see either continue at the group level or at the company levels, to keep driving the train in the right direction that he envisioned, and that's by, like I said, having people that are all in to teach, educate, mentor Green Berets coming in and saying, hey, we're here for a reason. You give your all and you be rewarded for it. I think, my opinion, sometimes that's lost in translation, especially when you start adding pay grades to yourself. You kind of lose yourself. And like I said at the beginning, it's like, for me, I'm not going to lose myself with any pay grade that I get, and I was a sergeant major that literally, like, and a master sergeant that, got told, like, hey, you keep pressing against the grain and you'll get relieved. Okay. Understood. That's my job though. Right. My job is to make you think. So that way you understand where I'm coming from, because I'm ground truth. And this is what I'm going through on a daily. And sometimes, through military, you get told, hey, at ease, you know, and you get told, hey, you're going to do this. And I understood that. But I always made it a point to say, hey, you're going to at least hear me, you know? And that's why I honestly, when Delucia took over group, I was like, hell yeah, because he's going to give you everything he's got, as much as he possibly can with where he's at, you know. That's just my opinion. Me knowing him, and then also being, like I said, being, if you want to say, competitive with him, to getting up into those higher ranks, and like I said, I consider him a good dude, you know. Um,
Seems fine to me. So,
yeah,
when you made 8, did you get another team?
no, I had the the opportunity because, like I said, is when I made 8, I was expecting to go to another company and possibly another team. But there was no E8 that was slotted to come in to take over the mountain team. So they was just like, hey, hold in place. I was like, hell yeah, you got it. So to me, I was like, that was a blessing to me. I was like, hell yeah, I love this now. This is even better. So I had the opportunity of being an E7 team sergeant for 2.5 years on that team, and then carrying another 3 years as a team sergeant as an E8. No.
So you held the same team for 5.5 years. That's pretty unheard of.
Yeah.
And that part's tough to do. Yeah, I don't know if you could duplicate that one anymore. That's tough to do. Good for you, man. That's fucking awesome.
Yeah, like I said, I loved every bit of it. I was like, yeah, this is what's up, But like I said, also at the other aspect of it, it was like, okay, when I was getting close to my team sergeant time, I knew my team sergeant time was coming, and I was like, okay, well, I was expecting to, okay, like you're probably going to SWIC, probably either going to do either some first sergeant job out in SWIC or be, somewhere within the leader chain out there in SWIC, or I was going to get sent to Okinawa, which I was like okay with either. But then it came to where it was like, boom, BSC, that's where you're going to be. You're going to be the first sergeant for BSC. And that, I believe, like I changed, for at least 2nd Battalion, I changed the mentality between operator and support, because I went down to every company. I talked to every detachment. I talked to every company sergeant major. I talked to every commander and said, rights, wrongs, or indifference about support cell. Tell me what you think. And this is all within the first like 2 weeks of me being the first sergeant. So everybody gave me their gripes, grumps, complaints. And then I said, okay, I've heard that piece. What would you like to see? And everybody took that. And so literally I went in, and me and the commander at that time, he was from the 82nd, came over, so he understood, regular Army standards, etc. And so I said to the entire formation, I said, you guys are going to understand why your job's important, but why you are truly here. And that is to support operators, right? This is a very privileged thing that you're allowed to do, because as you all know, you're not over in the big Army world, getting beat up and stuff like that, getting demoralized, because of X, Y, and Z. But here are the standards. If you can't meet these standards, I'll get a 4187 to get you back to one of those big Army. And so holding people accountable again, especially the support cell, it ruffled a lot of feathers. And when I mean we were doing the same stuff, convoy training, we were, SUT training and stuff like that. I said, because you don't know, I don't care if you're 42 Alpha, I don't care if you're a 92 Yankee, you're going to get a call to be like, hey, I need one of these on this detachment, and you're going to have to operate with them. And you don't know what that's going to look like. And when we started doing that, it became the understanding of, even with the leadership of those support cells, I was taking that time, me and my commander were taking that time to talk to them and say, hey, you need to start getting into the companies. Stop sitting behind your desk and find out what they truly need and how they want to see it done. That's how you become integrated. And we started doing that, and BSC, that started leaking over to FSC. And then next thing you know, the entire support cell was like, all the entire battalion was loving it, because they were like, oh, and it was like, like I said, it was a phone call, right? Operator to operator, right? It was like, hey, Zeus, this dude is shit. Don't worry about it. Send him back. I got one for you. And I'd go. That person would come, and I'd be like, yo, what's wrong with you? I gave you your opportunity. You were at the bat. You were at bat, and you struck out, and then, we correct it. And so that became a big thing to where, like I said, back again, people were like, oh, that's that regular Army side of them coming out now. Because I had to put my brain back into like regular Army because now I'm dealing with soldiers, right? Again, like lower enlisted soldiers of all pay grades, and their leadership. And I'm having to do the same thing of what I used to do of how do I get them to do what's needed at a high standard. And I will say that as a first sergeant, even though I call it like the appreciation tour, right? You go over, you be first sergeant, and yeah, you're around operators, but you're truly not around operators because you're around everything else and you're having to deal with big Army shit. I really enjoyed that job. A lot of people won't say it, but I really enjoyed being a first sergeant because I actually got to see the difference between the integration between these kids that were coming in that didn't understand how privileged they are to be a group, compared to the big Army, and the integration of operators getting exactly what they want, right? Because I believe like, hey, support cell, they allow us freedom to do what we need to do. That was always my mentality. But if you don't have if you have a crap support cell, then you end up doing it, and you'll find a way to do it. Might not be the most effective or efficient way, but you're gonna find a way to do it because that's what just SF operators do. So
Yeah, you're gonna figure it out one way or another. So
yeah.
how did that translate over? Because now you get a company, and now that's a lot different of responsibility. It's kind of this. It's the Army. It's the same, but it's not the same. Also, at the same time. Now, how do you translate into that from having a diamond to a star?
Yeah. It was at first it was a little. I say it was a little intimidating, right? Because here it is.
Did you
Well,
feel
for
like
me,
you
it's
didn't belong? How did you feel about imposter syndrome at this point too?
oh, dude, it was definitely heavy. I was like, wait a minute, you know, I'm in the same company, one, right? Which, like I said, is usually they push you to another company. So I'm in the same company. So now I'm back in front of people that I used to be side by side with, or that I know have been in the company for a while. Um, but once again, like I said, is at that time too, I think everybody understood who I was and what I was about. So when I took over the company, it was real easy. I brought in my team sergeant, my team leaders, and we sat in the conference room, kind of went over and said, hey, I understand some of you guys have worked with me before. I said, but now you're working for me. I said, and I don't want it to be uncomfortable between anybody. I'm here still to help you get out the door as fast as possible, or do whatever you need to do within your calendar, within your training cycle, within your deployment cycle. However, I'm going to hold the company to a high standard, right? Of like, you know, I don't want 100 calls coming for something minute that you can control on your team. So once again, I'm giving you the freedom right now to run your team the way you need to run your teams, because I'm not a micromanager like that, because like I said, coming into this, the very first day in selection was, I'm going to tell you what I need. You just do it. Big boy rules. And so literally, it was kind of uncomfortable at the beginning because the previous sergeant major would have like 2 or 3 meetings a week. And I nixed all that. I said, we're going to have one meeting a week. And I said, it's going to be for an hour and a half. I said, the first 30 minutes is going to be me and the commander speaking of what we need, how we need it, and assigning it to the team that it belongs to. The hour after that is for us to go through. And this is where I think it was kind of like a shocker to some, because I would have the school's NCO, I'd have the S1, I'd have all the S shops, a representative in there. I'd have FSC in there, BSC in there. And then literally we just go down the line of like, hey, Team X, what issues, gripes, complaints do you have? and this is where people will be like, oh, this person's pay is messed up. This DTS hadn't been approved. Yeah, yeah. And I'd have them, all those shops in there, like, that's your job. Also, too, the great thing about that is I had just came off the first art. So a lot of those guys knew me already in those S shops, to where it's like, hey, Sergeant Major Zeus is telling us, like, we got to tighten up this company, all their stuff. And so I made sure that integration, to where it was a touch point with every person that belonged to in that perspective. And then once we went through kind of like that, then I would talk about, like, hey, what are you hearing on your teams? Like, what's gripes, complaints, and then that's when I kind of like really dove into truly getting down to all the teams and understanding the personalities and personnel on that team. So, we had a guy that he was having some marital issues. His mind wasn't in the game. So, he was showing up late. He wasn't focused and stuff like that. So, I made it a point to, like, help the team sergeant get him to the right place, so that way he can deal with that. We put him up at B team for a minute just so he can deal with that situation. Didn't kick him off the team, just got him there so that way he'd have the freedom and space to do what he needed to do, and then we would turn him back to the team. Team sergeants that, didn't understand things, I made it a point to sit down with them at length to kind of coach and educate and mentor them on, like, hey, this is something you might want to look at. Yada, yada. This is what Big RV is looking at. This is what you're looking at. And it just became do that. Now, on the back end of all that too, I was being mentored by the CSM at that time, from battalion. So I listened to the one that Delucia said, and you had said something about, like, getting down and reaching back down. Once you get to the higher levels, you're kind of like displaced a little bit. So that was the number one thing that I was trying to alleviate, is still always having a presence. And of course, that comes with timing, right? Because everybody's like, oh, I got to go on this command circulation. I got to do this and that and the other. But I always made it a point with almost every team, no matter what training event, is either I was doing it with them or I was present, to ask questions and actually observe, with or without the commander. And I would like to say that I think a lot of team sergeants enjoyed that. Especially, I know the Marops team and Scuba team definitely enjoyed that, because I think it was like, Sergeant Major's coming out today, so let's smoke them, type of thing, but I try to make a point to do that, because, like I said, is when I was a team sergeant, that's what I was thinking about, was like, I wish the command would come down and kind of like see what we were doing. Sure, they see it when it's on, a 5 dubs or, a storyboard or something like that, but coming down. And I remember the battalion CSM actually taking the time to come down and be into our training and kind of ask questions and be in the team room with the guys,
It doesn't matter what level you're at, what unit you're at, how cool you think you are. Man, the more you look squared away, the more you can do whatever the fuck you want. Like you get, okay, we got to get this shit we don't want to do. Let's just get this done. And then everybody, okay, then you get the autonomy to go fucking do your training. Go, I don't know what the guys on the dive team do now. They sit in the sauna naked and hang out. But the rest of the teams, I'm sure they're training and for the future missions of America. But I don't know what the dive team's doing, but probably something gay. But yeah, the rest of the guy, you look squared away, you got paperwork squared away, you got your issues taken care of, and then you can do whatever the fuck you want, really, right? I think, how, no matter what anybody says, the distance from the team to the top of the mountain is pretty far, and there is a disconnect, and with every level it gets more. It probably doubles. That disconnect probably doubles with every level you're separated from the team. We'll see. I think it's there. I don't think it's all being heard. I don't think it's possible for it to be heard the way things are right now with the changes that are happening.
Yeah.
maybe I can help with that. Maybe this can bring some of it. But then I go, some of the stuff I hear, I wouldn't say on here. That's because that's none of anybody's business. That's not content, right? That shouldn't be out there. So how do you use the modern to connect the bottom with the top? Well, we'll see. Um, but um, that's the company sergeant major's job, right? To have a handle on his teams, and you're passing information up the same as you're passing it down, and to keep everybody informed. And what was the most, which of all the roles, of all your leadership roles, what was the most rewarding of all of them that you had?
Team SAR. And I say that because I don't know, man. It's just like one of those things. It's like, how do you gauge, right? Success as an operator, right? So, like for me, to be a leader, dude, and be like, okay, we have this mission set. I can send any one of my guys, literally any one of my guys, into X country with 4 other guys. So half of my ODA, and they can get stuff done like a full ODA, like professionally, and uphold the standards that we've taught each other, right? And I say we because I learned things from them, right? How to communicate, how to look at a different perspective. It wasn't just all me, right? It was a collective team transformation. And to have a guy go out there and E6, E5, to go in front of a colonel and pretty much talk that colonel through his mind thinking, and then also integrate that within our soft operations or our soft initiatives of what we need done. To me, that was rewarding. And then also too is to see the development and them getting promoted, man. Like I see it in even some of the operators on my team, when they talk to their buddy across the street that they went through, soft C, or they went through, selection with, they'd be like, dude, what do you mean you don't know how to do that? I'm like, dude, that's like an everyday thing in our team room, because like I said, as operators, I think that's where sometimes I think people forget, like, you're coming into an environment that expects a lot of you, but also too, that individual is expecting you to teach them because you're a teacher. At the end of the day, you're a teacher, right? Sure, you can get in a suit and a tie during the day and then put muzzle to mouth at night, but at the end of the day, you're a teacher. So if you're not teaching people, then you're not ever going to see the standards that you want, because you're telling them to quote unquote figure it out. Sure, you can tell them to figure it out, but you also have to be a backstop to be like, hey, I see you're looking at going in this direction. Now let me help you and kind of guide you back to center line, so that way you understand, like, hey, yeah, I see where you're going with that, but use what's around you. And so that to me was the biggest thing on being on a team. And then of course, just most rewarding. And of course it's just like, dude, I mean, it's like, being on a team, to me, that's a high pinnacle. Like, I could be a sergeant major in the Army. I'm still going to say team life was the best time for me. Being a team sergeant and being in charge of 12 barrel-chested freedom fighters, man, is like, to me, it was like, that's awesome. And to still have some of those relationships with some of those guys and their families, to me, I'm just like, dude, but it really, really came to fruition when I retired, because people spoke, and I never knew really the perception that people had about me, because you never know, you hope that they have good perception of you, but like some of the guys were like, you know, truly like heartfelt, like, this is what I feel about this dude. And, you know, it's a shame that he's retiring, but, you know, wish the best for him. So that to me is like I said, that's been the most rewarding thing.
Yeah, you don't know till it's over. That's the whole gig. You don't know how you did till you're done, or even years later. And then it's over and somebody calls you and go, man, remember this time? That was awesome. You did a great job. I'm proud of you. Oh man, when somebody hits you with the I'm proud of you, it's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh fuck. I
Yeah.
didn't see that one coming. Thank you. That's what it's all about, man. Fuck, man. I thought 3 hours flew by.
Shit.
Always does, man.
Yeah, man.
Well, I'm gonna let you get back to your Friday here. I got 5 questions for you here, and then I'll cut you loose. How's that sound?
Yeah. Send them.
Yeah, man. What's your response to thank you for your service?
Oh, thank you to your service. Usually what I tell people is everybody has a walk of life. That's what I usually tell people. I say, I appreciate it, but everybody has a walk of life. And usually that starts a small conversation, you know, like, what do you mean by that? And they're like, for some reason, my walk of life was to go in the military and to do this job. Doesn't mean that I'm better than you in any aspect, but that was just my walk of life at that time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, what we say depends on where the conversation is going to go. I stop the conversation because I just say it was an honor. But you're inviting, you know, a little bit. You're probably a little bit more talkative. When I'm out at Home Depot, I don't really want. I just want to go get my light bulb because my light's blinking. You know, I want to get
Yeah.
out of here. So I've been here. I've been to Home Depot 7 times today. I want to get out of here. But no, okay, that's a new one. Haven't heard that one yet. All right, what is the one characteristic that sets operators apart from the conventional forces?
One characteristic that sets operators out from conventional forces: persistence. I believe all operators that I've been encountered with, they're persistent. So they never take no for an answer. Just like what we've said throughout, you know, this is, you know, if there's a way, they're going to find it. You know, they are not going to quit until they get to yes. Even though yes may be long down the road, but they're going to be persistent enough to get to a yes. And then, I mean, physically, I mean, dudes are just wired different, man. They're just they're just like, we're gonna go until whatever happens. So, you know, I think they're persistent in getting things done, you know, however they need to get done.
Course demonstrates that. You got to be persistent to even get through the course. You just get through a selection or whatever the fuck to just get to the next thing. All right. What is the one moment of your career that you wish you could go back and relive or redo and it wouldn't change where you are now?
That's a good one. I would say, I don't know, man. That's a good one. That's a good one. One moment in my career that I would go back and change that would not change where I'm at today. I would say, probably when I had to come to terms to retiring. I think I was harder on myself than what I needed to be. I didn't look at the reasonings why. I just heard that I had to retire. I think if I would have taken a moment to kind of digest what was being told to me versus reacting, I think it may have been received internally and mentally for me differently. But it would still put me where I'm at today, you know?
All right. What's the best piece of advice that you received during your career?
Best piece of advice that I received in my career is constantly learn and never quit. And that was told to me by a sergeant major in SF. Never forget to stop learning. When you stop learning, then you get complacent, and complacent kills, of course. But also too is to never quit. Just because somebody tells you something doesn't mean that you can't do it. So never let that come into your mind. It was like, well, he told me I couldn't do it, so I got to quit. And looking back at my career now, that's what kind of fueled me. is when people were like, "Oh, like I said, that guy told me this is a career suicide for you." The hell it is, So I'm gonna prove you wrong. So
All right, last one, man. What were you afraid of then, and what are you afraid of now?
failure. Um, every day, my thing is not to fail my family. Um, and it was back then, it was the same thing, but also too, I didn't want to fail my troops or fail my teammates. And then after that, it was like fail the operators period or fail the community. Because they've invested time in me. They invested, my potential of what I could be. And so I just want to make sure that I give everything every day. And so that's literally why I wake up. I give everything every day to the people that I love or the people that mean the most to me. And, while I was in, people that meant the most to me were my brothers, and, now since I'm retired, the people that still and was then mean the most to me is my family.
I think you're doing just fine down there in South Carolina. I really appreciate you coming on the show, brother. How can everybody find you on the socials if they so choose?
I'm on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram. And yeah, I'm not a real socials person. This gym has Instagram as well. I'm on there every once in a while to give like a trainer tip Tuesday or something like that. But besides that, Facebook and Instagram, man.
Thing for me.
No, man. Like I said, continue doing what you're doing, man. I really appreciate the time, honestly. Like I said, just listening to some of your content, um, I was like, man, I would like to sit down with this dude and just talk to him, regardless if I, knew you or not. It's just because I like the interaction you're having with operators, current operators, that are retired, because it gives a different perspective. And in life, we need all the perspectives we can to make the best judgment calls and also to be the best version of ourselves. And like I said, you getting on telling your story, others getting on telling their story is just, like I said, it's just a Rolodex for people to pull from and say, hey, maybe I might be going through that. And yeah, I remember this segment saying this. And, like you say, is this person may know this person. And that's how we help each other. That's how we literally take care of one another.
Only takes one piece of information to help somebody out. So
Yes,
and I
sir.
put a lot of them out. So
Yes,
doing,
sir.
hopefully doing well for my guests and things like that. So, but
So
again,
what'd you work out
I
today?
really appreciate you coming on. Today we're going to see how my legs feel. Usually we'll see. We might just do deadlifts today. Um, I got 30 pounds to go from before my goal
What's
on
that?
deadlift, but 585. I want to do 6 plates. I've never been the best deadlifter. I don't know why. I've always hung around in the fives, but now I hit a PR 2 weeks ago, 555. I probably had a little bit more there on that one, but squats really taken off. I mean, we're probably in the. I hit a 505 the other day squat, and I probably left 35 pounds on the table on that rep. Where
Really?
so yeah, I've squats taken off. Bench is hanging right around 410 ish. Um, so nothing crazy there, but squats really, man, you feel manly. You squat 500 pounds, you feel
No.
manly. I don't. There's there's people squatting way more and doing more weight. Good for them. They're living in the gym. I I was drinking a lot 17 months ago, like a lot. I had really lost all of, not my size, but my strength. And to be back squatting over 500 pounds now, for the first time in my life, 17 months later after getting sober, baller, absolute ball. I hope that everybody can feel this content with where they're at physically one day. And that's what I want to show people. Like, let's just make a change. Let's just make the change and work at it. You may not get where you want to, and you might, and it might be really cool. And yeah, So I'm going to go to the gym right now. I'm going to go overdose on pre-workout, listen to some tunes, and get after it, and then put in a full day here at lesser known operators. I'm going to go work while in between sets. I do feel, and we got off a little bit here, but I'm when I'm not playing on my phone at the gym. I'm still doing this whole thing at the gym. I go there and I work. I make content for this. So I'm like, I don't harp on people at the gym for like hogging the machines and playing on their phone, because I'm doing the same thing. It's just I know I'm working, but I can't say anything. So I don't. I'm like, I gotta let it go. Like, they're just kids. Fuck them. They're probably not running their social media, but they might be. So I got to give them the benefit of the
Yeah,
doubt.
exactly.
So, brother, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you reaching out. Thanks for coming on, and we'll be in touch. Bye, everybody.